down there and show me what you're talking about.
Washington smoke coming down on us now, and then one from Cascade Lock. Like, you can't put it out of the, get it from all sides here. Have you done test with Rocky yet? Make sure we can see him, hear him. Hi, Rocky.
Hello, how are you?
I am good, and you?
Good, very good.
The Porch Fest event that I had at my house went off really well. I think I'm going to do it again.
Cool.
Live, as opposed to we are dead? No. Good evening. Today is Tuesday, August 13th, 2024, and we are going to open the City Commission work session for this evening, and we will have the roll call, please.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Marl.
Here.
Commissioner Mike Mitchell.
Here.
And Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Mayor Denise McGriff.
Present. You're going to be first from now on, so make sure we don't leave you out. All right, so the first item of business on our agenda tonight is McLoughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan, and this is an update. And is this Dana Webb? Okay. Come on up. And our wonderful consultant, singular, sorry.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Tonight is...
Get the mic closer.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Tonight is the final work session update on the McLoughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan. So we've brought you the various aspects of the plan as we work through it. Tonight, we'd like to present to you some of the streetscape options and collect any feedback about concepts that you don't believe should be included moving forward. And so our consultant, Nick Gross with Kittleson, is here to present.
Hi.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, fifth time here for this project. Looks like Evan is pulling up our presentation now. Okay. So good evening. As Dana said, this is a update on the McLoughlin Boulevard Enhancement Project, 10th Street to Tumwater Village. This is our fifth work session with you all. Next slide, please. All right, so our agenda tonight.
Actually, that could be a good slide if we were going to talk about that letter we got about trees. Did you happen to see that? And I don't know if those are the trees they're talking about or not. So just, did you see the letter from citizens?
Are you talking about this one?
I believe Christina
I can't see it.
It says 99 Walk Project comments.
Is that from,
Yeah.
yeah, just to keep it in mind in the course of the meeting.
All right, so agenda tonight, well, to date, really the four prior work sessions we've had with you all has really been focused on what we've been calling the shared use path alternative, that being more or less the parallel bridge to Highway 99 McLoughlin Boulevard. We'll recap the recommended alternative that we are suggesting moves forward, and then some future work that would be needed to continue advancing that. And then the real meat of the presentation tonight is going to focus on the McLoughlin Boulevard streetscape enhancements. So those are the things that we've heard a lot from this commission and from the public, a strong desire on that being kind of greening the corridor, slowing the corridor, how can we create a more pedestrian environment. So we'll present a couple design elements that we're looking for feedback on, and then we'll just open it up for more discussion.
So Nick, just real
Yes.
quickly, in the staff report, we talked about that most of the community members supported alternative 1B, so, but we're talking about 1B with a number 2 next to it.
Yes. So alternative 1B was really set the alignment of the path, and then within 1B we had 1B1 and
Right.
1B2. 1B1 was that two-span structure. We presented it last time, and then 1B2 is illustrated here, which is in that blue hue with the larger long span alternative. So more or less, to recap here, the recommended shared use path alternative moving forward is what we're calling alternative 1B2, the full external alignment. And again, that's pictured here, a little hard to see, but we have looked at this before. In terms of future work to continue advancing the shared use path element of this project, the next big milestone would be entering into the NEPA environmental review phase. Each of these bullets is going to have a timeline associated with it, and this is all work that is not officially happening by any means, but these would be kind of the next steps to continue momentum for refining and ultimately implementing the shared use path. So the NEPA phase would be next. Following that, we would enter, or you all would enter into the design acceptance package phase, or DAP phase, which would be also about a year long. Within the DAP phase, this is where you would get into the details of what's called the bridge type, size, and location package. So to date, we've presented a conceptual bridge type, that being that long-spanned alternative. In this DAP phase, that's when you'd have a true design and bridge engineer go in and further refine and confirm the type, size, and location of that structure in more detail. Following that, you enter into the project final design, the plan, specs, and estimate phase, which could be about 1 to 2 years, and then finally the PS&E to award, generally 2 to 6 months. One additional thing I wanted to point out with this, it relates to something I know has been of interest to this group, is the potential finding of an adverse effect of this structure. And that is something that would officially be determined or identified in this NEPA environmental review phase as a next step. To date, our team, from the work we've done, anticipates that a adverse effect may be identified as part of this bridge structure. However, because there is no other feasible or prudent alternative, which is the technical language as part of the NEPA finding, because there's no other feasible or prudent alternative that meets the project purpose and need, a adverse effect could continue to move forward with mitigation. So another way of saying that, and I had to write this down, I was looking up the ruling today. So if no such alternative exists, mitigation efforts can be pursued to reduce the impact on the Section 4F property, and in this case, that is the historic arch bridge.
Right. So how would that dovetail with the, so I guess one of the things that would be helpful, since members of the public may be watching this, so if you can just briefly explain what NEPA is and what those, because not everybody knows what those letters stand for.
Sure. Yeah, NEPA is the National Environmental Policy Act, or I believe that's right.
Yes.
And basically, there's several environmental review processes that that act sets up for, specifically in our case, transportation projects. One of which is Section 4F, which is most relevant to this project here, and Section 4F applies to historical structures, whether that's a bridge or a building, and how a transportation project may or may not impact that historical structure. That could be impacting it by attaching something onto it, or in our case, altering the experience of someone viewing a historical structure. So there becomes a little bit of a qualitative assessment involved in more so the latter example I provided of altering the experience one has when they view, in our case, the historic Arch Bridge, and that is all of this would be officially determined through that NEPA environmental review phase.
And then how would that juxtapose with the 106 process, which is sort of embedded a little bit into this, but is also a separate process, which SHPO would weigh in, the State Historic Preservation Office would weigh in on the 4F process as well as the 106 process, which they would be leading and be in charge of, as opposed to the Federal Highway Administration with the 4F process.
That's right. I can't speak too much more in detail.
Yeah, I know they dovetail, because when we were talking about the pedestrian bridge going across, one of the things that got brought up quite a bit was the 4F process, because even though it's not vehicular transportation, it's for emergency services vehicles, we were talking about the adverse effect of that bridge on the existing historic Arch Bridge. So this would be something similar, but again, it's not like it's in front of it, or it's this. In this case, it's going underneath it or in it or through it.
Right.
So, assuming it goes to the NEPA review and it's positive, it's going to allow it to go forward, can that be appealed? I'm just thinking about additional time frame.
Yeah.
Our attorney is saying yes.
Yeah, it can.
Okay.
Yes, it can
Okay.
be, yes.
Okay.
So,
And so I assume that none of these run concurrently either.
They can, the 4F and the 106 can run.
No, I meant the
concurrently.
ones that are on the ones on the chart.
So, when we were talking about tolling, there was a group of people talking about appealing the Federal Highway Administration decision that would fall under that 4F.
Yeah.
So,
No, I'm just asking if any of these one year, 1 or 2, can any of these be happening at the same time? Or you do this one and then you go to the
yeah,
next
you
one?
have, they're sequential, they can't run concurrently
Okay.
as far as my experience. Is that correct?
Yeah, there might be a tiny bit between the NEPA environmental and the design acceptance, but not fully.
Okay, thank you.
all right.
No, I guess my only comment was as far as adverse effect, when you look at all the potential designs, the one proposed seems to be the least harmful of any, both visually and for the experience and everything. So I feel pretty confident in it.
I think you mentioned that early on, that you wanted it to be as invisible when it hit the bridge as possible. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's those two spans are on either end rather than being next to where the bridge comes up.
Yeah, and also avoiding all those supporting columns.
And the high
Each
tension
one
wire.
being a risk as far as its soil quality.
Yeah.
So.
Plus we have the tower we have to avoid.
Okay, we're going to shift gears now to really focus on the streetscape improvements that I know you've all been highly interested in. And really, as I mentioned at the beginning, we've been primarily focused on the shared use path element of this project. This is the complementary improvements to McLoughlin Boulevard. So the goal here is really to enhance the streetscape along McLoughlin Boulevard to slow vehicular speeds, better integrate downtown Oregon City to the waterfront, further green the corridor, further emphasizing that boulevard experience, and serve as a complement to the shared use path alternative. There are two images on the screen here. The one on the left is an old Google Earth image of McLoughlin Boulevard down at 14th Street, the intersection there. I know it's a little hard to see. And then most recently, today, same image, same location, with the implemented improvements that were done, I believe, just after 2009. So you can see, if you squint, I suppose, or zoom in, you can see the landscape medians, additional trees, the widened boardwalk on the north side of McLoughlin Boulevard there. And really what we're trying to do is extend those improvements south through our study area from 10th Street down to Tumwater Village and even further down to the tunnel. So here's just another screenshot of those improvements made. This is right around McLoughlin Boulevard near 13th Street, that intersection looking southbound towards the historic Arch Bridge. And again, as you can see, these are some really nice improvements that have been implemented, some trees that are maturing, the landscape median, greenery, some tuck-in parking, and then off on the right side of the screen there, you can see that boardwalk feature. So this is really the vision that we want to continue extending south through our study area for this project. I'm going to go now from kind of west to east through the corridor and highlight some of the recommended improvements that we are trying to bring into McLoughlin Boulevard. And again, I apologize that this is a little small to see on the screen. The first thing to note is down at Railroad Avenue, not necessarily part of the McLoughlin Boulevard Enhancement project, but something that the city staff is working on is the Railroad Avenue deceleration lane. That's a dedicated right turn lane onto Railroad Avenue. So we've incorporated that into our plans. The first and main feature to note as part of our plan are some intersection improvements at Main Street and McLoughlin Boulevard. So ADA curb ramp improvements, curb extensions, signal upgrades, increased pedestrian signal timing and phasing. And then as we move to the north, we've also hatched in just conceptually, more so as a placeholder, and recognizing the coordination with the Tumwater Village frontage improvements. As we continue sort of north and now heading east, you can start to see the landscape buffer and widened sidewalk on the south side of McLoughlin Boulevard in front of some of those businesses and garages there. We're also showing a sidewalk on the north side of the street, and for all of the side streets approaching McLoughlin Boulevard, we're showing curb extensions which allow for shorter pedestrian crossing distances as well as the opportunity for increased green space. We're now moving east. This is the historic Arch Bridge and 8th Street, although this plan view is showing the streetscape, not the Arch Bridge, so kind of removing the Arch Bridge from the top-down perspective. We're showing a flush median that could be some kind of brick paver or something more aesthetically pleasing than just asphalt, and the continuation of the landscape buffer. In the cross-section on the bottom, you can see that we've got some...
Do you have the...
I think I have a laser pointer.
laser thing?
Nervous to hit the wrong button. Okay,
Yeah,
here
there
we
you
go.
go.
Oh, it doesn't come up on the screen.
Okay. You can see it, but...
Well,
Okay, whatever.
one of the, wherever there is green space, there would need to be some additional refinement and study into the feasibility of trees, but the notion or concept is to increase and provide trees as much as possible when it's in proximity to the historic Arch Bridge. There's some sensitivity to blocking view sheds, and same with sight distance at some of the intersections for egress and things like that for turning movements. But generally, where there's green space, there's an opportunity to increase trees. In this concept here, we are showing the preservation and maintaining the parking that is on the north side of McLoughlin Boulevard near that large utility tower and adjacent to the historic Arch Bridge. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple slides.
How will, Nick, how will the entrances and exits from those parking lots, how will that interact with or affect this proposal? I see those two parking lots that are there right adjacent to the bridge, and I believe there's a curb cut so that they can come in and out, but I was kind of curious as to how those would relate to the project.
Yeah, so this is really one alternative that we're showing right now. We'll talk about the other one in just a couple slides, but under this scenario, it's more or less maintaining the existing conditions in that parking area. area, and we'll present an open space concept that we're looking for you all to kind of just get thinking about as a secondary alternative. And then the last plan view concept here is now we're down at 9th Street towards 10th Street, and really a continuation of that widened sidewalk on the south side of McLoughlin Boulevard, landscape buffers, increasing that greenery and opportunity for trees. And on the north side of the screen, in that sort of darker shadow, that is the alignment of the shared use path, that separated structure. So those are really some of the visual themes and features of this concept, and then a couple key design elements that we have used as our sort of guiding principles. So as I've mentioned, we're really trying to extend the consistency of that boulevard treatment that has currently been implemented north of 10th Street through our study area down to Tumwater Village. We're including medians and landscaping buffers wherever possible, with the option for additional trees, widened sidewalks, reduced travel lane widths that still meet ODOT's Highway Design Manual guidance. Everything that is shown so far is meeting the freight requirements. We're incorporating that Tumwater Village frontage development, providing crossing improvements at Main Street, 7th and 10th Street, as well as continuing to explore that grade separated undercrossing concept at 8th Street. And all of this ensures economic vitality, art, tourism, and natural resource considerations are and continue to be a priority element for this plan.
So do you think that the third bullet will enable us to slow some of the traffic down through there? I mean, again, it's posted at 30, but, you know, I see very few people driving that, particularly the people that are going through. It's, you know, I mean, they're just moving.
Yeah, I think it's really the second and the third bullet. So as much as you can physically and visually narrow the corridor, people subconsciously begin to drive slower whether they know it or not. And sometimes you're physically forcing people to drive slower, and then with things like trees and landscaping, people just tend to naturally drive a bit slower as well.
If you could back up to the previous slide, so where, on the very top where you show the bridge, so how does that, would we need to realign those crosswalks, or did they line up, or is it kind of, to me it looks like it's in the middle of it. I can see a crosswalk and kind of going off at an angle. Is that what I'm seeing there?
Yeah, that is more or less an existing crosswalk, and so that would be maintained, and we would provide higher visibility crossing paint and things like that there, and that would be one of the key connections to the shared use path. Another key connection is at the existing signalized crossing underneath the historic arch bridge. So you could cross at that existing signalized crossing, and there would be a direct connection onto the shared use path immediately adjacent to the historic arch bridge. So kind of that halfway point between the full bridge.
Well, I know one of the things I thought was really novel in Milwaukee on McLoughlin Boulevard, they had a different color treatment where you were crossing from the intersections going over to the park. And I'm not sure if they were painted, but anyway, I think they're kind of wearing off by now. But it was really visually, it's kind of a reddish, brownish color. And so when you came up to it, you could see that there was something different there, which I thought was a really good visual sort of cue for, a driver if they're paying attention. Rocky, do you have any questions?
No, but the Milwaukee crossings, I think, were a thin embedded brick, but they did wear off over time. But they were very cool, interesting designs, but it did stand out, and I think they were kind of inlaid brick or something to like that.
Yeah, it was some sort of stone. It wasn't a brick, but it was kind of a paver of some sort.
All right. So now we're gonna show some of those alternatives, those design elements for further commission consideration that Dana spoke to earlier, and there's three. We're not asking you all to make any decisions tonight, but we do want you to be thinking about the trade-offs of these alternatives as it impacts and benefits the placemaking and the overall street elements of our plan here. So the first is the historic arch bridge open space as it relates to that existing parking, the existing parking being the parking next to that large utility tower there. So what is the use of that space? The second is the open space underneath the historic arch bridge or 7th Street as it relates to existing parking there. And then the third is the reallocation of space at the McLoughlin Boulevard elbow as it relates to the parking and business access there. So we'll go through each of these alternatives now. The first here, this is a couple screenshots of that existing parking next to the historic arch bridge and the utility tower. As you'll see, there's a similar theme to each of these alternatives. We want to preserve parking. We know that's a strong desire of the business community, but we also want to increase greenery and landscaping and slow the corridor. And so at times, the best opportunity for increasing green space and parks and parklets and trees is where we have existing parking today. It's one of the few spaces where there is really an opportunity.
Not metered? Should.
So here's what it looks like today. Here's another shot of it. So we're talking about that section that's shown in the yellow rectangle there, a couple other screenshots, and then on the bottom here, you can see a cross-section generally of what that looks like. The alternative would be to remove that parking. There are approximately 15 parking spots that exist out there today. So you would be losing 15 parking spaces, and in return, you could get something like this rendering here of, I believe this is a depiction of a linear park in New York City. You can see a bridge in the background there. But in short, you can the trade-off is you lose 15 parking spots, you get this linear park adjacent to the river, view sheds of the historic arch bridge, really a place to go and spend time at. So that is option or alternative one of scenario one. The next location is the 7th Street open space concept. So this is some of the space or the existing space underneath the historic arch bridge. Today there are about 6 parking spaces there, and similarly, if those parking spaces were removed, some of the benefits you could get with that would be a continuous sidewalk across those 2 alleyways. So you would close those alleyways formally to vehicles. You could provide a continuous sidewalk, upgrading the ADA curb ramps there, increasing the connectivity of that existing signalized crossing. You're also removing or eliminating the turning movement conflicts between people walking and accessing that alleyway. And you're further activating the space of those alleys for additional placemaking opportunities and a continuous kind of direct connection from Main Street using the signal to the shared use path. And we've got a couple examples of what that could look like. And again, we've got somewhat of a rendering or example of an alley conversion. I believe this is from Pittsburgh. But there's a lot of success stories in reactivating these alleyways that may or may not serve as more or less dead space today, but bringing in some arts or a cafe, outdoor dining, art installation, things like that. The real benefit I see of closing one or both of these alleys is that kind of straight shot, pedestrian dedicated connection from Main Street to the shared use path.
So what is the status? I mean, I'm assuming that that's part of the ODOT right-of-way, and that they have permits do they have permits from us and ODOT to be able to utilize that under there? Because, I mean, technically that's not, I did not believe that was private property. I mean, it's within the bridge footprint. So did you?
We have spoken with ODOT. I forget exactly, it was not, I don't remember it being a very straightforward answer.
Yeah, I suspect it's ODOT owned. They tend to like to own anything where they have a structure.
I know that.
The permit parking is through code enforcement, it's purple permit parking today.
Could we get some clarification on that?
On the ownership?
Yeah, and basically the status of that, even though we're giving permits for it, I strongly believe it's not public property. I mean, it's public property, not private property. That would kind of help in terms of looking at the alternatives that you're proposing here.
Yes, we'll definitely get back to you on that. And so, just one more depiction of, you know, the functionality of closing those alleyways. So, again, a little hard to see, but on the right side of the screen here, you can see the closure of the easternmost alleyway. It's shown in that gray color, that being more or less a shared use path or dedicated pedestrian space. And with that, we've shown the relocation of the existing crossing to the east side of the historic arch bridge. So that really creates this linear connection. You'd come off Main Street, you'd walk straight down the alley, you'd walk straight across at a signalized crossing, straight across McLoughlin Boulevard and tie directly into a connection to the shared use path. That's where it would be at grade with McLoughlin Boulevard. So this very linear connection from downtown to the waterfront.
How far from the apex of the curve to that crosswalk is it?
From the elbow?
Yeah, the elbow.
I'm not sure how many.
I just am concerned about coming around that corner. I mean, it's like that one that goes on the Railroad Avenue from the underpass. That is, yeah. Then you have to ensure the safety of people using that crosswalk. And how will that be ensured? Will that be signalized?
Yes, it would continue to be a fully signalized crossing.
I think there's a button there you put.
There is, yeah, push
I've
button.
crossed there.
Yep. Yeah.
So there's a button there that people are supposed to pay attention and stop.
I'm also for anything that slows people down, whether it be rumble strips or different surface finish that makes them aware.
I think I like that idea of putting something there as you approach it that,
Yeah.
because if they're going 30, it won't be much of an effect. They'll just roll over it.
They'll be aware that things are changing.
Changing, yeah. Good idea.
Okay, and the third and final location where we have an opportunity for increased green space is exactly that elbow kind of location that we've talked about. This is existing ODOT right-of-way. It's a pretty unique space in how it functions today. You can see on the top of the screen there's several trucks. There is a maintenance garage there. The egress is a bit unique. There's really no curb, so there's really little to no access management being implemented, and vehicles accessing that garage can kind of just turn off McLoughlin in that open space and turn back on. So this is not a common treatment for most ODOT highways, but you do have it here, and what really makes it a bit challenging is the curvature of the highway. So, as we understand it right now, there is an existing agreement with the owner of this property that is allowing the use of this. There is a very, very narrow sidewalk immediately adjacent to these garages, and there is enough space that is allowing for, a three-point turn for these trucks and other vehicles to come in, have work done, turn around in this open space.
So in that view, if you go back to it, I'd be standing at the upper left-hand corner of that rectangle,
Looking back across.
facing down or whatever you want
Yes,
to say.
yes.
You're looking at it from across the street.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the first alternative is, which we've looked at briefly already tonight, is really a continuation of a widened sidewalk, a landscape buffer This is really just hugging the curvature of the road, a pretty great improvement compared to what's out there today, and still providing some maneuverability of vehicles and preserving the driveway access points at this location.
Where would you suggest those driveway access points? Is it those two sort of white
Yes.
bump outs there?
Exactly,
Okay.
yep. And then the alternative is to, and this is, I guess I should preface this by saying that this is really dependent on future development and redevelopment of this space. So we're now looking much further down the road of if these properties turn over, if the business changes, do you continue to keep that active use, which is quite unique, and the access management component to it at this elbow. So if those businesses are to ever turn over, this concept here is really dependent on that, but it would allow for quite a bit of increase of green space in there, a small park of sorts. You could also do this by maintaining some kind of driveway access points to one or all of the garages, but it is going to be challenging from that maneuverability perspective of once a vehicle turns off, how do you kind of get them back on the highway?
I struggle with that one for any number of reasons. I mean, it's on a
kidding.
curve, the on and off, the acceleration from coming down through the tunnel and then through there, the attractiveness of a green space located right there, as opposed to the one that parallels the river, which really has caught my attention. I like the first. But this one, I'm not sure what the arrangement is. I think that you're talking about, is that the transmission shop?
Yeah, I think it's Larry Morton's transition shop.
Yeah, that's what I think. I mean, is that agreement in place and is that standard? Would that have to be voided or how would that work?
We just learned that there is an agreement because it's ODOT right-of-way, which is a bit unique in this space, and
I'm just not a fan of parking and egress and exit onto a main thoroughfare on a curvature.
It's not great.
No, of the three, that is the least attractive to me.
Well, even if they, the egress off to, onto
More straight.
McLoughlin,
Yeah.
adjacent to the entrance to Tumwater Village, there is a there's a three-way intersection, which will go back to a four-way intersection there, so people do stop, but then you've got some limited visual of the building when you make,
Yes.
so
Sight distance.
yeah,
Obstructed.
there's some sight distance issues there. In all the time I've lived here, I've never really seen a lot of active use there because I'm not usually there on the weekday, but the weekends there's nothing. I mean, other than the cars parked there waiting to be serviced or whatever. But when you took that, you can see there's a number of cars there parked adjacent, because I can't remember where the entrance actually is the entrance on the McLoughlin side as you
To the
come
garage?
Fifth, or is it, it's there. That's one of the openings.
there's two garage bays there.
And then what about on the other side?
And on the other side, I think that would be,
Wait, it's still got the Chevron sign there. That hasn't been a Chevron station for like ever.
there's an additional driveway access point, maybe two, in this orientation on the west or the left side of the image there.
Kind of where it makes that backward L.
Yes, where the curve really begins.
Okay.
So that's the update of tonight. We laid out sort of the overarching principles of the streetscape improvements. Within that, there are the three design elements that we'd like you to continue thinking through, the trade-offs of really green space, increasing open space as it relates to parking in most case scenarios. In terms of next steps, the next milestones, we're going to be drafting the culmination of all of this work into a plan document that'll be ready towards late September, early October. That is something that will come and present to you all. There is a resolution for support for the next grant that would continue the work that's being done We're working with Dana right now to kind of iron out the grant application and figure out if that's something that we fully want to continue moving forward. We can speak a little bit more on that. Staff public outreach continues. We have continued outreach this fall. Going forward, there will be continued outreach focused on city committees and other city focus groups. And then we will wrap all of this up in January, where we will come back to City Commission you all in hopes for adoption of this plan into the TSP as an amendment to your TSP. And that is presentation for tonight.
Should we go back and look at those three one more time?
Sure.
Three different.
Okay. So first one again, Historic Arch Bridge, parking, and then the linear park. We can pause here for a moment.
So I'm tempted to kind of split the difference on this one. Do you retain the parking on one side of the bridge and do the park on the other side of the bridge? Get the green space, but not, you said that's 15 spaces?
Combined on both sides. I don't know the exact breakdown, but there's certainly more on the
6 and 9,
So you're talking about
5 and 10.
On either side of the bridge?
Yes.
Not on the other side of the street, but either
Correct.
side, okay. Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I'm just trying to figure out if there's an option where we could retain some parking, but still get the majority of it be green space,
Yeah.
but not make the parking so close to the crosswalk where you have an issue where pedestrians come out from, behind a car and then there they are, even with the light. There's, they're right there. I mean, those parking spaces are literally right there by the bridge.
Danger of concept type views like this is what do 15 parking spaces lineally represent? Were they 20 feet apiece?
8 by 20?
Say we're talking about, 300 lineal feet? And what are we talking about for width of the possible green space? What does that actually become? Does it become this beautiful portrayal here, or does it become a narrow 12-foot band of earth? What does that get us? So we're talking about 300 lineal feet, and how much in this axis?
So you're asking, like on the upper copy where it shows the trees, how wide is that, is what you're...
Yeah, going from left to right, from the walkway to what will become, I imagine, a riverbank or whatever. What does that get? Are we getting a 20-foot band of dirt, or are we getting...
I think, I don't know the exact dimension, but I believe it's around 20 feet. There is a sidewalk out there today. It's probably about 5 feet. You've got parking and a driveway or, access. Combine that. Parking's, I think, about 8 feet. Driveway's another 10 feet. So you're looking at 20 to 25 feet of a width of a park.
So from about the point of that table to the wall is what we get.
So who's got their official tape measure?
I'm just saying, I don't want to be misguided by something that looks like,
It's really wide.
well, I would love that, but, what are you actually going to gain by doing that?
John, with your engineer mind, where's 20 feet? Where's 20 feet in here? From the wall to the table? From the wall to him, that's about 20 feet?
I would say this is the one that I feel most strongly about keeping as parking. I agree with Commissioner O'Donnell about it would be nice to have something that looks like that.
Yeah.
But I just don't think that's what we're going to get, especially given that it's going to be right against McLoughlin. And people have already issued concerns about just using the walkway that's proposed directly adjacent to McLoughlin. So I'm not sure how big of an attraction that's going to be, and it also doesn't matter if it's an attraction or not if we don't have spaces for people to go to that space in the first place. So that's the one that I feel most strongly should remain as parking.
Well, what about looking at something where we keep some parking, but we get some green? It's particularly adjacent to where the crosswalk is, but we have parking, further down maybe. That's kind of what I was looking at in my head.
Question, is that continuous, or is there a break at the arch bridge?
The parking?
Yeah,
There's a break at the tower.
There's a break.
there's a bridge.
Somewhere.
And the tower. And the tower.
And the tower, yeah.
So we could get something in there.
Yeah, so
Not
maybe-
something tall by the tower, but something on either side of where the walkway would be, so that it's a welcoming sort of green space, and then parking sort of beyond that is kind of what I was not eliminating. I'm not in favor of eliminating all of it, but maybe if we could get, you know, two spaces on either side, that would still leave quite a bit of parking.
Yeah, do something to kind of enlarge that landing area as you go across the
Yeah,
sidewalk.
that's what I was thinking.
But
Keep the other
a little.
parking.
yeah, so it's a nicer landing area, but you still have the parking. That sounds like a good option.
Yeah, because I think having parking right up to the landing areas is not gonna make it look like it's welcoming that you're gonna cross there. But if you had something on either side of it that, because you can't really park by the tower anyway, so that area could be available, and then maybe one space on the other side, if we get to the other side of the bridge, and then keep the parking the rest of the way. Because again, we want people to get there. If they, you know, there should be some availability for them to be there, but not right up to the landing area. I think that was a good point, Mike. What do you think, Rocky?
So I agree with the comments. I'm scared of using visuals like this because that picture looks great, but it's about 3 times as wide as the space we have. So I think there's a measurement. If you look at the rendering on the bottom right, I think it does say a measurement there of like 20 some feet. I can't read it because it's too small, but
Where the 2 trees are?
yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of shows the width there. I can't read it, but I want to say it says 23 feet maybe. I don't know.
Right, get up there real close and read it.
So that visual of the park space there is like, 60 feet wide. It looks great, but it's not something that, you're going to attract people there. I think Adam made a similar point about eliminating parking there. Eliminates people going there. If there's parking on that side, they're going to get out and they're going to go to that side of the street more likely than they will without the parking on that side. So I think there's some ways that we can maybe mix this up a little bit, but I think we need to actually see visuals of the space, even the open space under the bridge. We need to take pictures of that space and render it to that space, because they're a little deceiving. We wouldn't be able to put umbrella canopy kind of over that because the bridge comes down at an angle where it wouldn't allow for something like that. So it looks pretty, but we have to fit the space so people can really understand it. I think the area under the bridge has really always been a place that I think could be unique, either for some sort of little, vendor space or public restroom or just a meeting, a seating area or something. I think that has possibilities, and I love the connection under the bridge to the waterfront. So I think I'm anxious in seeing some more concepts to that point of the bridge space, and then maybe we could still have some green space in this inner parking, but I don't want to necessarily lose all the parking along that roadway, along 99.
Did you ever see the little eating space that's between where Doka is and the Weinhardt building, where they did the crisscross with the lights across there, and there were little cafe tables under there?
Yeah.
And
yeah,
they kind of created
yeah,
a little,
yeah.
kind of a little, you're
Yeah.
not you're off the street, but it's a little quieter there. That was, when you showed that, it was kind of like, oh yeah. And then there's another one down on the Ice Street side where there's the old jail, and there's a little shop back in there, and she's got some lights kind of strung across there, so it tries to make it a little more inviting.
The other thing I would say in terms of the parking is, when we look at that post-2009 terrace that we built, I mean, when we get to that, we're talking a width that's far greater, right? I think if we look at the width of what we built out there, that terrace goes in its widest point, maybe 60 feet. So it's a huge space, and still no one goes out there. Very few people, I try to go out there as much as I can, but, you know, that parking helps there, right there, because you have the parking and the width, so people are more inclined to park there and get it out and go out there. If we were able to, you know, in the future, figure out a way to make these spaces more active with the, maybe bringing back, I can't even believe I'm gonna say this, the idea of, well, we've tackled food carts to some degree, but there was a period where food carts and things like that were not allowed, or even hot dog stands or anything like that. But you know, what is going to bring people to those, you know, those edges of the river other than just a walking path? You know, is there places to sit? Is there places to look out, viewpoints, things like that? Which is obviously a lot easier in this area than it is as we get closer to the Tumwater Village.
No, we allow food carts now, so, you know, could be a little food cart.
Well, I don't think in that area, but.
Yeah, I agree, Rocky. You know, the attraction of what else as part of these Esplanade features, viewpoints, just kind of destinations. But
yeah.
I also, you know, like, I think one of the reasons why this section may be underutilized is because today it pretty much dead ends at 10th Street into a 5-foot curb-type sidewalk. Yeah. And so it's a nice walk down, and then you turn around and you walk back the way you came. So if there is that shared use path, you can continue your connection down, get a view of the falls, down to the future Tumwater Village open space. So hopefully that would kind of make a more attractive trip for someone walking or biking.
I have one more question really about what I guess we're referring to as the elbow, right? 99 turning towards the tunnel. There was a period of time where, are those benches, I know there was a truck that went off the edge there and knocked over are those benches still there, or is the space, I mean, we had some monuments and we had some benches there, but I don't know if that was all removed or some of it was fixed.
There's no bench.
And does anyone know? I'm not sure what the status of it is.
The monuments are there, Rocky, they got put back.
Okay.
The fence is repaired, but there's no bench there.
I think the bench is on the back side of the monument.
Yeah.
Okay.
So hold on.
I didn't know if this would erase some of that stuff, or if we would keep those things that are already there intact, or what?
You're right about...
Because it's not shown back here.
Commissioner Smith, you're right about the benches. They do exist on, I think, 2 of those seats. Last time I was down there, it's been a while, but last time I was down there. So on the river side, I think there's a bench.
Yeah, they face the river from the street. They just look like kind of blocks, but
people claim that they have
their bench is facing towards the river from that corner.
And as far as I know, this plan hasn't looked at the future of that space beyond it being a pedestrian zone.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, now that I'm up here, I get to ask questions. Can you go back to the, let's see, I think what I really wanted to see was the existing picture of that area where the power line tower is. So, right now, there's like this drive aisle, right? Isn't there? Can you drive from the side?
It's about, it looks like it's about 30 feet, 28.
You have to go back out?
Get around that.
Yeah. So there's no way, but we could do parallel parking, just like we have in the area, and still have a landscape strip there, right?
Well, there is parallel parking there.
But we could go drive aisle tight.
Lane tight, kind of like what we have in the other section.
Yeah.
Yes, you could.
And still have some space for something.
Yeah. There you go.
So in that sense, it would actually look more similar to this. Right,
And so go back to it, because where that blue car was parked next to the bridge.
Yeah.
So what I was talking about is that, see where that blue, I think, is it blue next to the red one closest to the bridge?
The light blue on the left?
Yeah, so if that space was eliminated, that would provide that sort of nice continuation of a green space.
Yeah.
And that's only one space. And then if you go to, we don't have a picture of the other side, but on the, there's another blue car on the other side there. So if we had that space too to provide sort of an entry to the bridge, then we could still keep all the other parking. But it just sort of, as Mike said, it sort of makes it open and inviting, and you're not going in between some cars. So, you know, if we have 15 spaces here and we just take 2 of them out, that still, you know, leaves quite, 13 spaces there for people to access, do the new math, to access the, mental math, to park there and say, oh, look at this, I can pull in here and then I can go.
So, John, what you were saying, that line of cars there is quite a ways away from the traffic lane, right?
Yes.
So you could do like the treatment in the other photo and gain that space. That sounds very.
I like that too, yeah.
I like that too.
Yeah, and if you wanted to eliminate one or more of the parking spaces for more green space, however you did that.
Yeah, so I said one on either side of the bridge abutment.
Just going off the aerial, looks like you got about a 15-foot drive aisle, then an 8-foot travel lane, then a 5-foot sidewalk. So that's roughly 28 feet, right, curved.
It gets us something.
But let us look at, get you a good number on that, just to try to put into what that spatial, what the depth of that space is, right, so that it can be, especially if we can compare it to further north, where the other improvements have been made, to give you some idea of depth there.
Can we look at alongside the bridge? The alleyways? Yeah.
Remember back in the day when you could actually drive up those and come out onto Main Street?
Yeah.
I do remember that.
I've done it several times. Thinking, oh, I need to go there, and then I'd go up and wait for the light, make my turn.
Not to throw out something negative, but as much as I love the idea, as Commissioner Smith said, of that being a cool space
Activating it.
under there, because there aren't businesses right there, as opposed to the one you mentioned just off of Main Street, is it going to become an attractive nuisance? Are we going to have?
That could
Are
be
we going to have issues?
Well, that's why we bring in those food carts that Rocky's talking about.
I hate to not do something cool because we're worried about what it might turn into, but.
Well, the question is, how could we activate it?
Yeah, and foot traffic does that. If there's a lot of foot traffic, it's going to be self-policing.
Maybe it's a mini food court pod.
Well, Commissioner Smith's point was well taken about vertical distance. I mean, how much is usable under that span? I mean, look at the height of those piers.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not a lot there.
I think once you get past where that gray or black car is, that's probably the last usable
That's
space
what I
there.
think.
The other one is like really low. That's where you get some.
I have a couple of thoughts too. Sorry, I don't know. I'm on a small screen, so I'm not sure if people can see my hand or not.
I see your hand, yes.
To Mike's point, Mi Familia actually's patio for their restaurant is there, and so there's eating, but it's all fenced in, you wouldn't even see it. I think part of it is also building the spaces creates the businesses that would want to go there, or would create right now, you're not going to open your storefront if you own a building to that space now, because it's not a place that you would want to do that. That we've noticed that the businesses that are remember the alleys on Main Street were never used as the way they are now. They were used as alleys and cars going through them like these were. And now we have these businesses that are opening, like Weinhardt's was open to the alley. There's businesses in those other alleys that are now utilizing those alleys for entryway to their businesses that didn't before. So I think that's how we treat the space can reactivate that space. And I just know that eating once outside on the deck of Mi Familia, it's all fetched in like a cage there on the side there. But if that was to open up and you could have, other things going on there, I think there's a possibility.
Good point. I forgot about that. I got thrown off by this picture, forgot about what's on the other side.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting.
I mean, your point's well taken, but I think, that's why I think if we could take this, I'm a Photoshop person, I'd love to take that 20 feet section along the riverfront and then this section and create something, because these pictures that kind of give you an idea, I mean, I guess you could see kind of this cool umbrella kind of covering to some of that space, but when we look at pictures, we want to apply the pictures to the space, and they have to look. So maybe I'll do some creative work.
It'd be
here,
interesting to think about this
I think there's cool potential into there.
I think it'd be interesting to think about it as a connection from the river to the elevator, expanding it just
well, that too. Yeah, that absolutely.
Just the connection between Main and 99. You could imagine coming down the elevator, out the tunnel, and having this corridor that would take you straight down to the river.
Yeah.
It would be able to maybe expand it beyond just this block right here.
Absolutely.
Isn't there a name for those in Spain? It's coming to my head and I can't quite, it's not Las Ramblas, is it? They call those little alleyway sections like that. They have them in Spain in between the buildings. And I'm thinking of that term for some reason, and it's coming up to the top of my head, and I kept thinking, oh yeah, I remember when we talked about those some years ago.
I really like that idea of tying it into the elevator somehow.
Yep.
Because we've often tried to think about, the next block over, you have the Singer Falls, right?
Right.
And it's always been a struggle, especially once we got it lit back up and everything. It's beautiful at night, right? But it's like, okay, how do you get folks down there? So it's trying to think of those east-west connections from the bluff to the river. Because this gets to your question, Rocky, of how do you get more people utilizing the river side of 99E, right? And it's giving them safe passageways and good view corridors to get themselves, one, drawn to that space, but then willing to get across 99, which has always been our barrier.
Awesome.
I think the same applies to Larry's transmission.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the most, it's been historically Larry's transmission forever.
A very long time.
It's got, it does have, people see it, they know where to go, but it's like on our waterfront. It's the most prominent point on our waterfront aside from the Tumwater Village property. To me, it's just amazing that it hasn't been scooped up and done something different there, right?
Well, you think about what's in front of it on the Main Street side, which is Black Ink, White Rabbit, and if something like that was continuing around there, and then we have the traffic slowing down, it could be a more welcoming space. I'm not saying that there isn't any value in having transmission shops, because people still need to get their cars fixed and stuff like that, and they need to be, located where people have access to them. But like you said, yes, that is on the riverside, and it was never viewed like that ever as an asset. And now we're starting to change the paradigm of looking at that particular corner, because like you, I always thought it could be something more. And so when we had those plaques there and things before the truck hit the fence, it was, you could walk along the side of the publisher's building and then you could come around and read all that stuff. But, getting there was, a little dicey.
As Tumwater Village moves forward, that's going to be too good a property for something not to happen to it.
Oh yeah, somebody's going to snap that up and turn it into something else.
Commissioner O'Donnell, I wasn't sure what you were, when I heard you talk about this, I wasn't sure if you were saying there shouldn't be vehicle access here, so more park-like, or if you were wanting more vehicle access in this corner. I couldn't tell where you were landing.
I was concerned about sight distance and curvature and obstructed views and slowing down to enter into the current parking or entering into the flow of traffic. I just didn't feel that as a green space it wasn't a particularly attractive location because of the traffic volume. But I'm not sure what to do with it.
Which way does 6th Street? 6th Street goes out towards McLoughlin.
Yeah.
So
really,
people.
You're not supposed to make a left there.
No, you're only, it should be a right turn only, but yeah. So I'm thinking, okay, in the meantime, so we still have the use there, so people could come down 6th and turn into his lot rather than coming on, coming around on the other side, because basically you just kind of make that curve and then you kind of drive it, there's that big swath of concrete and asphalt, and people are just there.
More analysis.
Yes. Okay.
Any other questions on this one?
Very interesting.
I'll just share for our next steps, we are scheduled to be at CIC on the October meeting, as well as NRC in October, and then we're working on getting on the Transportation Advisory Committee in September or October, and connecting with DOCA. So we're kind of working through, kind of going back to those committees and touching base with them again before we submit our application for adoption.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Very informative.
Okay. I need to go to the restroom.
Take 5.
Yeah.
Take 5.
Well, since we're all going to be going to the same place, we maybe need a little bit more time.
Your meeting.
Okay, let's come back at 19 after.
Chapel of the Chimes?
He's not at the little chapel of the Chimes. Okay. Call the meeting back to order. Rocky, I hope you took a break as well. Is it hot there?
Yes, it is hot there. It is hot here. I'll be home tomorrow.
All right, so next on our agenda is a review of the Park Place Concept Plan Code Refinement, update on the Planning Commission review and work that has been done to date. Thank you, Aquila.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. You guys can hear me. There we go. All right. So good evening. Yeah, we're here to bring you an update from the work that we've done over the past several months. Pete Walters here, and so is the city attorney, Bill Kobeisman, and so each of them have parts that they're going to contribute to the update. Let's see. Thank you, Evan.
And everybody still has their hair because you haven't torn it out yet over this, which
It's grayer than when we started.
I understand that.
So in the packet, we attached a legal memo and an economic analysis of the neighborhood commercial area, and then I'll go over the code revisions that we've worked on so far. This is just a little briefer for all the folks who are listening at home, our millions of viewers across the land. So the Park Place Concept Plan is about 500 acres that's east of Oregon City, and it was added to the UGB in 2002. And the concept plan was developed with input from residents and stakeholders and other jurisdictional partners. And they came up with a common vision that provides a framework for growth and that respects and augments the area's context, history, and natural systems. The concept plan emphasizes good urban design, multimodal connectivity, and opportunities for placemaking, and cultivating community, and above all is a place for sustainable growth. So ultimately, the concept plan will ensure that the land is brought in and planned in an efficient and sustainable manner and maximizes the use of the land while protecting natural resources in the area. And so this transitions into Bill. He's going to kind of go over a legal memo, and I guess just a little bit of context. When we started the work with the Planning Commission, we wanted to set some kind of parameters about what changes we can actually make. Like what is the paradigm that we're working in right now? Because the land use paradigm has changed a lot since the concept plan first was adopted. So Carrie Richter put together a memo for the Planning Commission, and that's what's in your packet. And so Bill will kind of go over some of that.
I think the thing that you said about the parameters, so I think it's important for the public to understand that at the time that we created this concept plan, we were following all of the state guidelines and land use plans that basically talked about concept planning and doing these framework plans so that we would have a clear path of where we wanted to go with these areas that we were going to urbanize later on. And so where we are now is almost, I won't say it's a complete 360, but it's definitely a 190 from where we started out. And I think that that's something, at least what I hear from the community, that has been the hardest thing people have struggled with. It's based on what Oregon City's community told us that they wanted.
And you're right. You took the first bit of what I was going to say. That's absolutely right. Back in the late '90s, early 2000s, as this was coming in, there was a mandate from DLCD, from Metro, that when things come into the urban growth boundary, we're going to have a sort of pyramid of how we look at things. 40,000 foot level, we're going to bring it into the UGB. 30,000 foot, we're going to put a concept plan. 30,000 foot, we're going to do the zoning, and gradually narrowing down. And that was exactly what the city did, what Metro did, and what the community did. And they bought into the Park Place concept plan and really created this thing that it was a pretty far-reaching and really
vision for what they wanted. Some of the challenges were baked in, but the key piece is that the Oregon land use system over the last few legislative sessions has changed pretty dramatically in ways that really make it difficult to implement the vision that the community had. And so I want to go over some of the challenges. As I said, there's some that are baked in from the beginning, but several of them are not. And the first one is really transportation.
The other thing that I heard from a resident just about a week ago was that I remember when we started this process, people in Park Place and the community were very skeptical that something like this could work. And I think that there were a substantial amount of expectations about what was going to happen with all of the work that people, put in. I mean, I hear the same thing about the master plan for the Riverwalk is kind of, there was some level of expectation. I think what you are going to do and what we are trying to do as a staff and commission is try to figure out how we can manage those expectations and help people maybe lower the expectations because, again, as you've stated, things have changed substantially. And how do we create a pathway to where we still have the confidence of the community that we can meet their goals and desires and vision, but still try to create a pathway as best we can to meeting some of the letter of the law, even though, some of us would say, but that's what we're struggling with right now.
The letter of law changes things in ways that make that community vision really difficult to implement. And so it's sort of, what we thought we had, we don't have anymore, and what can we do and what can't we do? And the first area I want to talk about is roads. And this, to a certain extent, was baked in from the beginning. One of the challenges out there are some steep slopes, some transportation issues, and a key issue is connecting to multiple ways through the plan area. And in particular, Park Place concept plan calls for both Holly Lane and Swan Avenue to connect from Redland to Holcomb. And I want to talk generally about how roads often get built when they're serving new development and some of the challenges with that in this situation. Typically, if a new subdivision comes in, there's a certain amount of road building that happens internally. They've got to provide on-site roads, connecting to the existing subdivision and building out on their frontage. And in addition, if they cause nearby intersections to fail, they've got to figure out how to fix that. But all of that is subject to some U.S. Supreme Court cases that limit how far the city can go with that. There's a series of cases, Nolan versus California Coastal Mission, Dolan versus City of Tigard, that require that exactions, this requirement for people to build things or to provide money, can't exceed the level of development, or as the test is called, the exaction has to be roughly proportional to the impacts caused by the development. And so if, there's a new subdivision comes in and it's adjacent to 205, we don't make them improve 205 because you just can't justify the cost of doing that for the amount of impact they're going to have on 205. That's sort of the extreme example. But, we make them build a local road. We upgrade the county road to local street requirements. We internal ones. And where that becomes difficult with the connections of Holly Lane and Swan Avenue is that connection is very unlikely to be done with one single subdivision or one single development. You just can't make the connection with one. They would have to cause intersection failure, land would have to be part of the application, the cost would have to be roughly proportional.
So what happens with, as you know, over the last 20 years, community members here have talked about the cumulative effect.
Yep.
So you look at Central Point, Leland, Parrish, so we have this subdivision, this stuff. So when does the thing tip over?
Yeah.
I mean, people have been saying that the whole time. This development is the beginning of the domino, and so why aren't we making, we know what the impact, we know what the end is.
Yeah.
And that's why we have a little bit of the problem that we have now.
Right.
So this to me is that same situation. We know that little bites are going to end up being the big bite at the end, and so.
Yeah, and you see that, with Beaver Creek 213.
Yes.
And that has its own set of issues. This, in some ways, is somewhat different in that, it's not small bites as much as almost, a lot of development back there, you want that second way in for a variety of different reasons.
Well, and even within one development, when they do it in phases, I mean, the totality of the impact is the 3 phases together. Initially, it's, I'm going to do phase 1. What's
I know,
my
and then we
impact?
get told, this isn't going to trigger that. Well, we know it will. We know that it will.
Yeah. And, this is something that communities throughout Oregon, throughout the country are struggling with. How do you get that development to pay its way? There are a number of ways, that can be done. One is, state and federal grants. Those are difficult to get. And in this case, right now, this connection is actually outside of the city. It's in, Clackamas County. It's identified on our TSP, but it's not on the county's TSP, which is problematic if we're trying to get grants. So that's, one thing to make sure those funds are available. Work with the county to try and update their TSP. Alternatively, what some jurisdictions do is there are a number of measures that allow the cost to be paid by benefited properties, such as local improvement districts or reimbursement districts. Local improvement districts can be problematic because if over a third of the people object, it kind of stops it in its tracks. So what you need is enough people who are interested in developing and willing to pay their share, and then you can, work on that. There may be some possibilities for that out here. Another option is reimbursement district, where a developer builds a particular piece of infrastructure, whether it's transportation, water, sewer, and then as new development connects to it, they end up having to pay their share. But there's some limitations with that in that I think, our code has a 10-year period plus 2 5-year extensions, if I recall correctly. So there's some timing issues, and, getting a developer willing to front that can be a challenge as well.
Isn't there another way too? That if we had all the money in the world, we would build it now and then make sure we got reimbursed by everybody through requesting. But I don't know of any jurisdictions that have been able to do that, although I was curious when I was in Bend last, I said, how did you get all these roundabouts built without any development being around them?
Yeah.
They front-loaded it.
Yeah, actually our former city manager of Oregon City, Larry Patterson, was heavily involved in that. And, if in fact we had a big surplus, that is certainly something the city could do. But I don't know, Mr. Zook isn't here, but I suspect that the answer is we can't really afford it right at the moment.
How does one implement a local improvement district on projects yet to be built? I understand the reimbursement component, that's simple.
Yeah. So the local improvement district would function, either somebody comes in and says, here's what I want to build, can you help me do a local improvement district? And we can assist them in assessing neighbors because we have the authority to do that. Alternatively, the city could, on its own, create a local improvement district, identify the road corridor, use the funds to condemn land if necessary, negotiate purchase if necessary, and build it and assess against the neighbors. So, it can happen in a variety of different ways. It's a matter of how much leadership the city wants to be out in front of it, and how much, we want to sort of let the developer take the leading role in if in fact that developer is going to develop a significant chunk of it, they may be willing to do a lot of the work up front. It really is going to depend on how development comes in and what the city is willing to and able to take on.
Yeah, the reason I asked about you talked about voting parties. Well, who are the voting parties when the thing is yet to be built? And then is the LID, local improvement district, is it assessed only against the subdivision yet to be built or around surrounding pre-existing properties?
Yeah, it would. When you do a local improvement district, you assess the benefited properties, and that's typically, whoever is going to be adjacent to it, who's going to take access off it, and the assessment is based on some mathematical model of probably the development potential on those. And so, we got an area,
So if there's 1,000 parties to it and 500 of them are gonna be brand new, and the other 500 are beneficiaries are outside the new construction, they're all gonna be voting parties. But the 500 under new construction, is that one vote under the contractor?
So I have to go back and look at it. Okay. My memory is that it is whoever, if you own 1/3 of the value in the area to be assessed. And so, you have one property owner who's got a big farm that has a lot of development potential, they would pay more, they'd have more of a voting stake. But if they're not thinking of development, don't want this, and vote against it, they can have a huge impact. If, in fact, that large property owner says, yep, we want to do this, we need this road for our development, we're going to vote in favor of it, we're going to build tomorrow, we're going to build 10 years from now, they may well vote, in favor of it, or not so much vote in favor, not object, because the way it works is that we create the local improvement district, hold a hearing, and there's a certain amount of remonstrances that have to come in to stop it. So, it's really going to depend on how the development applications come in, how much of a leadership the city wants to take. It'll probably take some creativity and some work, and hopefully have some developers willing to work with the city on this.
Or not.
Or not. So that's the transportation issues. And the next one is, the legal issues. And this is really, we get into what the legislature has done and how the framework underneath the Park Place concept plan and actually, throughout the city has changed while since this was approved. The most important change is really the concept of clear and objective standards. And that is something that this commission has heard about, and that this city has actually done a fairly good job of putting into the code already. But there have been some recent developments that suggest that maybe it goes further than we had initially thought. One of the issues that came up in the Icon appeal that we had is, what exactly is a development of housing? Certainly, you're putting out a subdivision, you're going to build houses on it, that's a development of housing. What happened in Icon was a master plan, and that's a step above the subdivision. And LUBA said that's also the development housing. How far up the chain does that go? When it gets brought into the UGB as residential land, I don't think so, but we don't have that answer yet. And so there's upwards, and then there's also downwards. There's a recent case out of the city of Cannon Beach where LUBA's basically said that off-site road improvements are subject to clear and objective standards. And also that, steep slope regulations, and, make clear that, that's not.
They require clear and objective. I was going to ask you to explain that. I wrote a note here and I said, I don't understand that.
Yeah, that particular development in Cannon Beach is a complex one that's been going on for 4 or 5 years and basically has two neighbors who absolutely neither side wants the other to do anything. So they've challenged just about everything. And what happened, as it happens, this individual residential lot is immediately adjacent to an extremely steep slope that would have to be platted but never built road is on. And the question came up, do they have to build to city road standards? And the neighbor said, the neighbor said, yeah, you got to build to city road standards. And the question was whether or not those road standards had to be clear and objective. And the owner of the property that's trying to develop said everything has to be clear and objective. And so if the road standards aren't clear and objective, we don't have to meet them. And LUBA agreed with that property owner. Now, I think
even if there are geologic hazards that could completely upend the whole,
yes. In that, as far as the geologic hazard, the city in that circumstance said, we don't have clear and objective standards. We just said, you got to go out and get a geotech to review it, and then you got to do whatever the geotech said. And the city actually said, that's not clear and objective. We can't apply this. The neighbor appealed that part of the decision, and Luba said, no, the city got it right. They can't apply them because they're not clear and objective. And so that means, we've got for steep slope issues, we've got to be clear and objective. Not part of that decision, but something that may come up in the future is stormwater regulations. How we treat stormwater. A lot of, when you look at like geotech, stormwater, a lot of the engineering standards, they're written to allow the professionals who know this stuff best to assess the individual location and say, well, how do we best deal with this? Clear and objective doesn't really let that path happen. And so exactly how that's going to play out, we don't know. But it is an area that this is a classic example of how the whole Oregon land use system was built around the way things worked. And this is undercutting some of those foundations.
So it appears that clear and objective is being expanded outside of the immediate areas under development. So can the city or any jurisdiction establish a clear and objective transportation standard that says the road infrastructure must be capable of vacating, allowing egress from the area to safe harbor in X amount of time? That 70% of the occupants have to be able to get out of there within 1 hour. Is that a possible standard? It could be established, and that's clear and objective.
I think it may be possible.
I'd give it a try.
What's safe harbor?
Safe harbor's out of the immediate danger zone. I'm thinking about when we had fires up there.
That was my assumption also, but some of those definitions get a little.
We can say out of that immediate area.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
And define the immediate area by a radius, because I could just see this, where there isn't any extra egress, some disaster happens, people can't get out, they're trapped, etc. Estates start suing, because if we'd had X, we might have been able to exit in a timely manner and save our lives, but because this was a dead end or whatever it is, we were trapped, etc. I mean, when I start thinking about the unintended consequences that keep going, it goes off the charts.
Yeah.
For me, and just like, again, building in an area that has a propensity to slide in, the city of Cannon Beach says, look, we don't really want you to develop there, and the developer says, well, I'm going to do it anyway. They build it, falls off, slams into somebody's house. I mean, it's endless.
Yeah, I mean, the trouble is we're smarter than that now. We know that where the landslides are. We can identify what's happening with them. And, if this kind of takes that away. It takes away the ability to rely on people who have the professional expertise, because we've got to say, A, B, or C, and that's it. We don't have the ability to say, follow the professional's advice.
So could we say, for instance, let's just use a crazy example, that we do not allow for building on slopes of more than 15% because and it's very clear using technical expertise or the maps of LiDAR or whatever, and we say, no, you cannot build. Here's the clear and objective standard, says if it's above this percentage, you can't build a road there because X, Y, Z, and whatever.
Yes, but.
Okay, yes, but. Okay, what's the but?
Two buts. One is, yes, but if in fact you say this area is now unbuildable, you've kind of bought a takings claim.
Sure.
You've devalued my property. We can argue about whether there's any value on there because you can't build.
Build on it, right.
But that's.
Yeah, I knew that was one of the ones. What's the other but?
The other one is an interesting one, that the way the clear and objective standards are set up is, you've got to have standards that are clear and objective, but you can make a discretionary path as long as the clear and objective standard is still there. And so you can make a clear and objective path have an alternative one. And so if in fact you make the clear and objective path problematic for people to get through, then you're more likely to get them to go discretionary. However, part of the clear and objective requirements is that the clear and objective standards cannot act by themselves or in concert to discourage the development of housing. What does that mean?
Who knows?
But if in fact, there's on the record that the city is adopting this standard to make it so that people can't develop without going through the discretionary path, you probably have a problem. It's more, how do we, and so the discussion is what clear objective standard can we put in there to make sure that any building there is safe, and maybe you require certain levels of foundation, or there may be some things. We haven't gone into it. I know some cities have traveled this path much more than we have. We have some alternatives in some situations, but we haven't dug into a full clear and objective. What they sometimes call is a cookie cutter. It's like, here's the outlines you must do, and if you do that, cookie cutter, fine, you're in. Otherwise, the discretionary path. So that might be something that we do a little more heavily, is a very prescriptive clear and objective path, and another one that allows for more flexibility. Of course, that was part of the general development plan. The master plan was, to provide some flexibilities, and that was part of what the I-Con application that was remanded by LUBA was. They came in with a number of adjustments, a number of flexible things that they did, but I-Con didn't get everything that they, didn't get enough of what they wanted, and challenged anyway. Yes. Too many cases running around in my head. Yeah.
That explanation actually touches upon a component of the Richter memo that talked about moratoriums, and that you can institute a moratorium, which we have, like for SOARs.
Yep.
And you can do it 6 months at a time for 3 consecutive periods, but you need to try to resolve the situation that's causing the moratorium within that period. So that may be a route, in the way of transportation, if the situation we're trying to resolve, which in the case of that development is egress and safety, if we're working towards resolving that, we could potentially place a moratorium on building. Maybe that's overstepping my case, but could potentially place a moratorium until such time as we were working on resolving our safety concerns and additional egress by road improvements.
My memory, and I didn't look up a moratoriums, I know Carrie mentioned it in her memo, is that, you've got to identify the specific thing you can't do, and then in addition, while you're working on fixing it, you still have to process the applications and just sort of say, okay, you're approved, but you can't build until this is resolved.
Until this is resolved.
So you've got a backlog that once the 2 years or whatever it is, it's worth looking at, but I'm not certain it'll solve what we're trying to solve.
Well, we really do want to solve the problem.
Absolutely.
I know for me when I sat up there, what I wanted first and foremost was the ability to safely exit that area on roads that currently will not provide that, either be Holcomb and certainly not Forsyth. And I wanted those roads built that would allow egress based on our experience during that one fire season. And if we could say that's a transportation issue, and if I listen to the expansion of clear and objective to slide areas, it certainly applies to road areas. So maybe we need to combine the two, that we put this thing on the books, that this is our clear and objective standard for road access and egress, and this is our moratorium until such time as we are working towards solving that. It's just trying to give breathing room and accomplish something over a period of time rather than try to react to a bad situation after it's in place.
And that's what we'd be forced into, was
absolutely
reacting to the bad situation after it already happens. And that is not how Oregon City has and should do things. To me, that just is backwards.
And all this, and I want to make it clear to the public, all this is a reaction to state dictates that have placed us in this very difficult position to try to manage our own sandbox in the world.
Yeah, so I'm gonna leave that aside. That's something we're sorting out, and again, communities throughout the state are, and you know, frankly, at this point, we don't know the full extent of it, and hopefully we don't have another test case in our city.
I don't mind the test phase. If we need to lead the way in some of these things, if we need to put in a moratorium based on transportation shortcomings,
Sure.
I'm willing to go the distance on that and see what happens.
Okay.
But I'm just one.
Well, I know, but, I mean, there was a little bit of NIMBYism, but there were reasons why the majority of this property did not come into the city when they requested annexation. Number one, we weren't ready for it. Number two, we needed to do a concept plan. And number three, it has a multitude of problems that may or may not be able to be solved through engineering. I mean, we know that already. We have the example of the Mill Creek Canyon situation. Oh, we can engineer this, and you know, let's face it, if the Earth decides it's going to do something else, there is very little that we are going to be able to do about it. It will happen. And, you know, in the long run, you know, probably should have precluded development there. Now, we're very fortunate nothing has happened yet.
I did what I could.
Yes, you did what you could.
Yeah.
But there's still a propensity. I mean, you know, we could have the perfect storm and
Yeah, I mean, the
that
reality is that in Oregon City, as well as a lot of other cities around the country.
I mean, I'm not just talking about us.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the bigger picture.
But, you know, my point is that if it was easily developed near a city, it was probably already developed. And, you know, once you start getting out, or, you know, even the undeveloped in the city, there's typically hair on them. And that's, you know, that's just the reality of what we're dealing with. So I'm going to move on from the clear and objective because we can talk about that all night. One of the other issues that has the legislature changed on us with is middle housing. And this was basically the legislature adopted some bills that require the city to allow.
Mike, just a tiny bit closer. I mean,
Sure.
I can hear you fine, but I just want to make sure it's.
Nope, thanks for the reminder. Where the city is required to accommodate multiple dwellings on a lot. We must allow duplexes anywhere single-family homes are allowed, triplexes and quadplexes based on the size of the lot, cottage clusters again. The middle housing standards have generally already been incorporated into the code, so I don't think we need new standards on those, but it does change some of the calculations of density and other things about what's happening in Park Place. And, you know, it's one of those things that we probably can't go back on. We're just going to have to deal with the fact that there's more development likely down there than was anticipated. Finally, as far as the legislature, there's one that hasn't gone into effect, but it probably will come January 2025 when the bill takes effect from the latest legislature. And it's likely under that bill that any applicant for housing can request an adjustment of certain dimensions on an application. They can adjust setbacks by up to 10%, reduce landscaping by 25%. They can adjust parking minimums, lot sizes. Basically, all they have to do is essentially say, I can't build without this, I need an adjustment, and the city is going to be required to give it to them.
And there's no why they need it? I thought you said that there was. They have
to state why, but it's a really low bar.
Let me see, what is
Some of those allocations were mandated at 25 residents per.
Yeah.
I think it's per acre, which is a lot size of 1,742 square feet, which is about 40 by 40.
It's frightening.
Yeah. So in order to get the adjustment, they've got to state that they'll provide housing not otherwise feasible due to cost or delay. It's necessary to reduce the sale or rental prices.
And is there a basis for any of this?
What do you mean, is there a basis?
Not that they have to show us.
So if I come in and I just say, well, unless I get this, I can't build this, and I can just say it and I don't have to I mean, that's ridiculous.
Understood. This was a pet priority of the governor, as I understand it, and, it made it through and we can talk about the situation that caused it, but it's really immaterial. The bill was adopted. There is an exemption if you can show that. It's not in here, but if a city can show certain things, I know Aquila has started looking into whether we can qualify for that.
So I'm not sure, we're still gathering the data, but it's basically showing over a certain number of years, I can't remember if it's 5 or 10.
It's 5.
Is it 5 years? Over the certain number of years, maybe it's the last 5 years, that the discretionary body has granted like 90% of the variances that have come before them. So if we can show that, then we don't have to comply with the mandatory adjustment section. Because basically we're showing that we're
more flexible and willing to work with people.
Okay, I just saw an article in the Lake Oswego Review that they're going for this. They're applying for they're asking for the exemption because they've been able to show.
And to the extent, like I said, Pete and Aquila have already been working on it, and we're trying to get that data.
Has Paul said anything about that?
No, he hasn't.
Yeah, well, might be worthwhile talking to them because there was, like I said, in the last Lake Oswego Review last week. Yeah. There was quite a bit on that, and I said, we need to look into that.
Yes, and we already are. We just don't have the data yet, and to the extent we can qualify for it, we probably, we're see no reason not to. So, and so that, it's, we'll see where that one goes, but that may be something.
I just think in cities that are, have less staff and less sophisticated than we are, I just. Yeah. So that's kind of the legislative side of things where things have changed. Chances are next legislature, don't know if, I think there's some housing issues that didn't get resolved that may come back. So I see Adam nodding his head. He's probably more familiar with them than I am. But did you cite that bill in the memo? I may not have gotten to that.
The adjustment bill?
37? What? Yeah. 1537?
SB 1537.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's in the footnotes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah. So, we're probably not done dealing with the legislatively mandated changes. But I want to move on from them. The next thing, which is about parkland. One of the key pieces of the parkland concept plan was the comprehensive look at park. A large 8 to 10 acre community park, a smaller 3.5 acre neighborhood park, off-street trails, not so much parks but related, green buffers. It was, I think, a critical part to the community. And, the question of how to provide those parks is subject to some of the same issues of the roads. The exactions are interesting and problematic. The proposed code changes that staff has developed have a formula similar to what was used in Thimble Creek, where each development either requires dedication of land or pay a fee in lieu if the dedication isn't where the city wants, or there are a variety of different reasons. That way every house pays some towards parkland, but ultimately the city would then have to purchase the parkland. There's been some suggestion of, I think there was a suggestion to the Planning Commission that the city, specifically survey exactly where it wants parks. That gets, again, into the takings issue, and there may be some adjustments based on, how things develop and where roads are. So we probably don't want to do that. But that's going to be a critical issue is parkland. There may be some other options, but that is going to be a critical issue with the transportation. Is how do we get the parks that we need back up in there in the comprehensive plan?
And Bill, weren't we trying to compensate by making those areas, designating those parks so that we take those extremely sensitive lands out of the quotient of, okay, can we build housing here? Well, it's really got this issue, that issue, so let's make it into a park where it'll have a very low impact use on it as opposed to coming in and clear cutting roads.
I think that was part of the discussion. Some of the trails might be more that way, sort of the unbuildable land, let's make them green areas. But I think there's also a desire in the concept plan for usable, ball fields, play structures and things that don't make sense in those sensitive lands. Mm-hmm. And so it's, how to balance, the need for that type of activity as opposed to unbuildable ones.
Bill, how does that formula at 4 acres per 1,000 people come into play in a phased development?
I can take a stab at it. What we're drafting right now is that if it is proportional, and it comes in at 50 acres, but it doesn't get to the full minimum acreage that we're asking for. So we have the 8 acres that we want to see built out, but the minimum contiguous acreage is a number that we specify in the code. In the case of the northern park, it would be, what are we saying? 4 acres. And then the remainder, we would get through either fee in lieu or dedication of future development. But we're asking for a shadow plat, or, to show where that park is going to fit in adjacent to the immediate development that you're planning. So the idea is that we get the full park eventually, but we won't know when.
And part of what we're trying to work through is that if the phase doesn't proportionally result in all of the parkland, can we ask for, instead of dedicating, can we ask for a fee in lieu? So if the phase is in one part of the development area and the park is actually not even touching the phase where they're developing, how do we get there? So we're still trying to work through some of those details. We have the code drafted up, but we need to kind of button it up.
So to what use would that fee in lieu be placed, and where would it be held?
I don't know where it would be held, but it would eventually go towards purchasing all the land that we need. So if the developer can't dedicate it, we would use the fee in lieu to purchase the land to make that park happen.
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep it simple for me. If there's a 3-phase development, 1,000 people per phase would call for 4 acres per 1,000 or 12 acres total. How would that be accomplished initially, and at the conclusion of the project, will we have, understanding that we have this fee in lieu proposal also? Yeah, and
I'm going to give the mayor's favorite answer. It depends. If in fact, a phased development is somewhere where no park has been identified, then, getting dedication doesn't make much sense. I know that cities have been through the history of getting, trying to dedicate, parks with each subdivision. You get little pocket parks that really aren't much use. And so that's where we'd want, the fee in lieu. In terms of a phased development, how that would actually be structured, I frankly don't know at this point. It depends on how the code gets written and how the application comes in,
Yeah, and it would also, to me, it would also depend on what is the assessed value of a fee in lieu? Is it the raw land that the builder gives up? Say we give them a fee in lieu for all of it, and toward the end of the project, we want to buy 12 acres of his land. Mm-hmm. Does a fee in lieu cover that purchase? We don't know is the answer, I think.
Yeah. Well, especially if the park's meant to serve 5,000 people, right? Not going to have the money. You're probably not going to have all the money necessary up front.
I suppose
so that's where we're going to have to come up with other ways to probably purchase it. It just depends too. What's the value of the land going to be upon appraisal? Is it usable land? Is it not there's so many variables that go in there, but I mean, the objective is to try to get a pot of money that makes it available to purchase.
Well, we're gonna
I
ask
don't
the
see
builder.
how, I mean, how can you possibly do that when you have no idea what the land is gonna cost?
Right.
Plus, side issue, missing middle land divisions. If I'm a smart builder, I say I'm gonna build 100 houses times, 4 people per house. There's 400, so there's my park calculation. Oh, by the way, now I'm gonna build triplexes, and there's gonna be 3 times as many people, but I paid you for the original, I'm saying the single-family houses. How, any idea how that would be?
Middle housing still pays SDCs.
Right, but as far as calculating a fee in lieu for 1,000 people without knowing how many dwelling units might actually end up getting built if they use the missing middle housing.
There is an OAR that allows us to require the developers to tell us how many units they're building and not just the number of lots, and that is beneficial to them in terms of the other infrastructure that they have to build, identifying that up front. Otherwise, by the time they come in to actually build it, they have to reevaluate if they're building more than what their original subdivision forecasted.
Yeah, I mean,
That's in statute somewhere.
It is, yeah.
Administrative rule.
I didn't want to bring this up during your discussion the other night about annexation assumptions with Metro, but traditionally we knew a single-family residential was going to be roughly 1 unit. Maybe we had an ADU. They assumed 2 to 4 units per single-family vacant lot in there. I mean, it's an interesting question that we struggle with. What do you assume and what do you force the developer to tell you, city, so that we can analyze it appropriately, kind of in this world where single-family isn't single-family anymore.
And, in terms of estimating land costs, we don't know, but we sort of build that into SDCs and roads and other things. Could be that we acquire this fee in lieu based on what we anticipate it's going to cost, and there's a housing, bubble bursts, and all of a sudden land values, drop. And, it's.
Well, I think the question, when would the assessment be made? If it's made early and then the terms of the assessment would change based on what's built, it could be high or low.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is there an opportunity to modify it at a later point in time, or once it's paid, it's done?
Once it's paid, it's done.
Yeah, see, that doesn't work very well. That's okay. So
No, we're trying to make rules in advance for things that are unknowable.
Yeah.
I was going to move on to neighborhood commercial. Do you have more on the parks or? The Park Place concept plan, one other key component of it was a neighborhood commercial area where, there was an attempt to a South Village and a North Village, and there'd be, commercial uses, so you didn't have to go through Beaver Creek 213 or something to go for everything you need. But the code currently allows a wide range of uses in the neighborhood commercial, including commercial and office, but also live-work dwellings, housing in conjunction with commercial use, duplexes. In addition, utilities are allowed in the neighborhood commercial zone. So, and that adds another layer of complexity to it. If housing is involved, we'll need, clear and objective criteria to apply in even the commercial zones. There may also be, concern about utility uses using some of the commercial zone. And so, that's one of the policy questions that the Planning Commission is being asked, and it may come up to you, is, what do we want to do with the neighborhood commercial? Do we want to protect it for commercial uses and maybe, eliminate some of the particular uses that would otherwise be allowed? And I think the final issue we really want to touch base on is stormwater. The Park Place concept plan really focused on, green on-site stormwater treatment. It was, the cities adopted the stormwater design standards and provide for 4 different levels of storm best management practices, or BMPs. on-site retention, on-site stormwater management, off-site, or fee in lieu again, with the idea that those are the priorities that they go in. And the attempt when the standards were adopted, I think, was even to try and keep it clear and objective. It hasn't been tested. We think we're in pretty good shape on it, but that may end up having some potential issues as well. There was some suggestion about using, adopting a DEQ standard that applies, chemical concentrations in large waters that really are unworkable at the development level. And so that may be something that comes up, and we can talk about that when it comes up. But, at this point, I think staff's view is that the stormwater standards are in pretty good shape, that we already have in place. So those are the issues, there's that have really come up and that staff is trying to deal with. And, it sounds like a lot, and there are really some daunting issues in there. And the legislature has changed the landscape we're working with, which leads to maybe the city might have to take a more active role in infrastructure and amenities than anticipated. But, there are going to be some changes, but we think that it's still likely that the Park Place concept plan values can be met. It's just maybe a little bit different. So that's really what I had.
What about the neighborhood commercial issue?
I'm sorry?
What about the neighborhood commercial issue?
Pete actually is going to dive a little deeper into that one.
Is that live work, or is that a different category?
Neighborhood commercial is a zone.
A zone.
Okay.
With the number
It
of
allows live
different
work in that
uses.
zone.
Because
You can have live work in the zone, but we've
I
not
just
been
thought that-
successful in that.
I thought when I read the 9-page Richter memo that live work was free of many constraints that others had to follow. And I'd have to go back and look for it.
Yeah, so the way the code is structured right now, there's a limitation on, in mixed-use developments, you can't have more than 50% of that development as residential. But in a live-work situation, you can build a live-work unit, and there is no percentage.
Yeah, it was free of that constraint.
Right.
Yeah.
But then how do we end up getting some assurance that it's going to be built? Because we went down that path before without any constraints and we didn't get it.
Right. So,
Yeah.
the next 4 slides on the presentation are a summary of the Johnson Economics Report. Jerry Johnson and his company did the original market analysis in 2008. That was part of the existing conditions report that went into the concept plan. And we had a little money, so we asked him to do sort of a targeted look at the North Village neighborhood commercial area to update that. He did a site analysis, which looks at the subject site. He looks at the regional market area, the household demographics and spending power, residential and commercial market and demand. And we also asked him to take a very brief look at the Thimble Creek design standards and give us his impression of what those design standards what kind of impact those design standards might have on the viability of developing the neighborhood commercial area. Next slide, please. So the main points out of that report, and it's a pretty quick read, is that within the primary market area, there's roughly 1,800 households that build out. As we know, it was March 2024 when they did the study, but I think these trends are still current. Retail vacancies are rising sharply, which is a weaker demand for retail space. The site has virtually no access and no visibility in terms of commercial development right now. So currently, much of the retail demand is met by larger suppliers outside the market area like Costco or Home Depot and shopping centers that rely on cross-shopping to have very efficient service there. He said that the Holly Lane Redland connection is really critical for the redevelopment of that site, as well as residential development to occur nearby. And if it does, then some of the small-scale retail and personal service uses in that area, such as doctor's offices, real estate office, clinics, personal services, and cafes could be supported if there was sufficient residential development. And that outlook could all change with increased development, both locally and regional. Next slide. So, the impact of the certain design standards, like most of our adopted design standards not proposed to change markedly. So we're talking about our site plan and design review criteria, which affects where buildings can be placed, commercial buildings, and where parking is required to be placed in relation to those buildings. They indicated that some of these standards would impact development on smaller, shallower parcels. We're looking at an area that's about 12 or 14 gross acres, and on the piece on the north side of Livesey is about 4 acres, and it's about 200 feet deep. So there is a fair amount of design room there, and I wouldn't anticipate that those design standards would be difficult to meet in that area. We also have this maximum building footprint of 10,000 square feet, and that would be unlikely to impact the viability of commercial in that area. So the overall considerations are that small-scale commercial use is an important component of the mixed-use village in that area, but there needs to be a critical mass of residential development in the immediate vicinity, and this may take a long time to realize. The Planning Commission also discussed ways to allow more flexibility in the short term because of housing demand and their expectation that housing will develop first. And so one of the things that we are drafting is potential increase of the current limit of 50% of commercial building square footage and increasing that allowance for residential to 75% in the zone. And they supported that, and it's very much just a draft right now, so we have more discussions about it. We also looked at, what it would mean to have unlimited amounts of residential use within the NC zone, for example, if you were to have a multifamily and nothing else. That didn't really have much support. The other things that I didn't put in the slide here, but that we're talking about are with respect to public storm facilities. We're talking about putting a limit on the size of a off-site regional storm facility in the zone, and also limiting, what's the other thing? Parks, yes, to like 0.75 acres or a half an acre for a park.
Yeah,
if
3/4 of an acre.
And that would be in the NC zone, so
Right.
that I guess what you're talking about is trying to make it so you can't use up all of that. I guess the title was yours, protecting it.
Right.
And that's
Yeah, one way to talk about it.
Yeah.
Is like reserving it for what it's intended for.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to do an overview of the code changes that we've drafted so far. So as you remember, we started out by looking at the 11 key elements in the concept plan and then comparing that to what's already been adopted. And maybe what needed to be changed or added to. We identified these chapters, so there's about 9 different places, 9 different chapters that we're amending, that we're proposing to amend. So I'm going to go through them at kind of high level just to give you a summary of what we've looked at. So the first section is Chapter 16, which deals with our land divisions, and this is specific to the street design and alleys. In most of Park Place, alleys are required, but we are drafting a modification to allow in the Natural Resource Overlay District and the Geohazard and in the transition zone where alleys an applicant could request to not provide an alley. So the transition zone is not a land use zone, but it's an area between the existing subdivisions and residential areas that are not in the concept plan and then new development within the concept plan. So we're kind of building in this kind of buffer between those 2 neighborhoods.
And we heard that a lot at the hearings about making the transition so that it actually felt and looked more like a neighborhood rather than it was here and then here.
Right. Yeah.
I remember that very distinctly.
Yeah, and that was part of the concept plan as well, is to have, some buffers between neighborhoods. So alleys are one place where we would allow, a developer to not build an alley there. We had to add a number of definitions, so that was another place where we've made some changes, partially because we have made some specific requirements about the site, not just site planning, but the residential design in Park Place. And so there's some very specific types of design and also in the neighborhood commercial. And so we needed to define all of those. So I just put a few in there. I didn't include the whole list, but we added quite a number of different architectural features that needed definition. The next area is Chapter 1708, our low-density residential district. We changed some of the dimensional language in there. We didn't change any of the standards, but this is where we start to introduce the idea of this transition zone. And so we're requiring a setback between an existing dwelling outside of the concept plan area and a new dwelling inside the concept plan. So that setback would be 40 feet between dwelling units. And then we made some other changes to the table, the dimensional standards table, mostly for readability. So then similarly in medium density residential, we created this transitional zone, and it's the same setback, so 40 feet between dwelling units. And we've also required that the lot sizes match, so new lot sizes would match what's in the existing subdivision, and that way you kind of get some conformity between an already developed subdivision and a new neighborhood. There is a potential for modification, but we're trying to encourage that the lot sizes match each other.
And I'm glad to hear all that, because that's consistent with discussions we've had over the years where we didn't need 3 neighbors on your one property line, where the transitions were gradual and the setbacks were there.
Can you go back?
Sure.
To what Commissioner O'Donnell just said, is that is lot sizes to match? And Commissioner O'Donnell hit on what the issue was, which is somebody with
an R10
a wide lot outside the area, looking at 3 houses.
So going from an R10 to a smaller.
Matching up the widths so that one house is lined up behind one house, because that's really what the issue was.
I think right now it's not drafted that way. I think it's lot size. I don't know that it's the lot width, so we can take a look at that.
So so what I think I hear you saying is that we get to the end of Oak Road and it's an R10 lot. On the other side of that R10 lot, we have a new development. And so what you're saying is that that lot that's next to that R10 lot would need to match that R10 lot?
Right.
In terms of its configuration, so that, like you said, you're not going from a single-family dwelling with a 20-foot front setback to 16 row houses all in a row right next to that,
Right.
with a 40 feet in between.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. That's, the intention is to create that transition for, into the concept plan area.
But it wouldn't necessarily be a single-family dwelling on that lot. It could be a attached housing, as long as it met that lot dimension.
Correct.
That's where you gotta be careful.
I mean, I'm trying.
Lot size versus the number of houses.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's.
Because even though the lot size might match, you can do now
Well,
the
that's what I'm.
housing.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The lot size would be the key, not the number of units.
Because we can't
Right.
control that anymore.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
we may not be able to control it, but the objection was, how many houses am I gonna look out at
Yeah.
off my back deck?
Well, a clear example is if you look at the Holmes Park development, you've got the one single-family house that was set out there. Right out their back door is a giant wall with 4 or 5 units, like right there. It's for sale, by the way, which was interesting.
I always thought the transition was supposed to occur within the new development. 10,000 outside, 10,000 first row, step down to 8, step down to 6,
right.
but within the new development.
But you
The
keep,
first one would be a match.
right, but you could have multiple units on the lot, not just a single family.
Well, again, it always came down to, and we keep saying the same thing in different ways, I don't want 3 houses on my back property line.
Yeah. And just one more question. Is that 40 feet between dwellings, is that and whatever the setback is?
That basically is the setback.
So if
Get your
my
mic closer,
dwelling,
Pete.
if I'm
Pete,
outside the subdivision.
get your mic closer.
If I'm outside the subdivision and my dwelling is 30 feet from the property line, they could build 10 feet?
Oh, no, they'd still have to meet their setback.
Okay, so it is,
Oh, I
it's that
see what you're
requirement
saying.
in addition to the setback?
Yeah.
Right.
It's a minimum, right.
Okay.
There's also a requirement for a landscaping buffer, which could either be a tract, but it has to be planted with either shade trees or some density of, if it's backed up to the natural resource area, whatever standards apply.
No laurel or arborvitae.
Right. So there's that too. But, that's, can take a while to mature, right?
So 1710 is where I'm having heartburn, which is your next one.
Do you want to tell me your heartburn, or should I?
Sure, I'll tell you the heartburn. It says here, allows multiple family in 3.5 district rather than going through a master plan process. Why would we allow multiple family in the medium density? I thought that was supposed to be a zone that we were holding for maybe duplexes or triplexes to make it more palatable for middle housing. I don't know why the planning commission would consider that. I don't support that. My note was, middle housing, yes, but not multiple family, would not provide a good transition to go from single family attached or detached to multiple family. It will end up using up our 3.5 zone, which to me should be for that middle housing, the concepts that we have with the duplexes, the triplexes, and getting those in there as a transition between this part of the development and that part. If we allow the multiple family, that's going to get used up. It's going to get totally eaten up by that. I mean, let's keep the multiple family in the multiple family zone.
So the reason why it's worded this way is because currently, right now in the code, in R 3.5, you can request multifamily, but it has to go through a type 3 master plan process. And so in order to make that clear and objective, we made it a permitted use.
I think it should just be deleted, period. That way we don't have any discretion. It's what's allowed in the 3.5 is, I just don't want to see the 3.5 land get used up with multiple family housing. If it's an outright permitted use, that's what's going to happen. we're not gonna get that middle housing or that workforce housing that we desperately need. We've gotta have some area where we can make that happen and help make that happen. And multiple family, that's the easy path.
I was only gonna add that right now, the default upon annexation would be R5. It would require a zone change to R3.5 if someone were to take advantage of that, but.
Somehow we should say in this, we using this zone in this concept plan area to encourage, you know, the middle housing, the workforce housing, rather than, you know, these big, giant, multiple family apartment complexes that we've got everybody now complaining about again.
Do those two statements, they're not in conflict with each other in any way? Because the second statement is 17.4 dwelling units per acre, which breaks down to 2,500 square feet. So they're just independent statements. One does not impact the other.
It's a maximum density of however many units per acre.
Okay, so 17.4 dwelling units per acre is 2,500 feet per unit. That's not, that works well with the...
It's multiple family housing, that's what it is.
Okay, well, as long as they're, I just want to make sure it's...
So it would end up being attached units. So if there's consensus to eliminate it, I think we can. I don't...
Are we talking about a density similar to what's at South End Road? South End and
I don't know. I don't
sorry.
know what's at
Warner
South End.
Parrot?
Yeah, when you get past the gas station there, and then you're going
Yeah,
towards.
that's the MUC, and I think it's similar, yeah.
Yeah. I would, guys, I would say let's please take that out of there.
Well, it's still clear and objective if you remove it, so.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's still clear and objective, and then we can get, you know, I just desperately want us to do something to help get that middle housing and that workforce housing.
What you said just now, Pete, is what I needed to hear, because I agree with what the mayor is saying. I think since HB,
SB?
no,
2001?
2001,
yes.
The missing middle housing bill was passed. They passed it, and then they built a bunch of apartments, and that's not middle housing.
No, it gets swept under the rug.
I agree with you, and since it seems like we can do that in a clear and objective way, I would agree with you.
I agree too also.
As do I.
Okay. Done.
I did the same thing you did with the calculator, and I said, well, that's not middle housing. That's not, and somehow put statements, say something that's clear and objective, that this zone in this area supports that type of housing, because if we say it, we might get it. We could get it. And thank you for saying that, Adam. You taken it right out of my brain that middle housing law, it sort of went off somewhere, and nobody's talked about it since then. But that was, you know, that's something we all agreed as cities that we needed that. We're not going to get through all of this. My head's already exploding right now from just the legal memo that we went through.
No, we're on a timeline. We're going to get through it.
I know.
We've been doing this since May.
I know.
We can get through it.
I know. It may be so, but you know, my head, it's just like I want to say, I'm sorry, Ms. Herd-Ravage, my brain is full. I need to go home now. You know, I spent a lot of time looking at this, and there's so many questions I have about the legal memo that I wrote in the margins. And so we're going to do this, and then I think we're going to have another bite at the apple on this. It's a lot. It is a lot.
So the rest of what we did in medium density is I kind of already went over. We did, so we edited the table for better readability and added these separation requirements for that transition zone.
But we didn't have the table in the packet.
No, I didn't include include any of the actual code language in the packet.
Yeah.
Just a summary of what happened. So the residential design standards, this probably was one area we spent the most time on redrafting. So what this used to have, or what it has today, are pictures, and pictures are not
Clear and objective? Really? I thought a picture was worth 1,000 words.
Not anymore.
And those 1,000 words have multiple definitions. So we removed the discretionary language, we're taking out the graphics, which are not graphics, they're actual pictures. And we're adding some very clear definitions for what we're trying to achieve for the residential design.
Could we use the pictures as an appendix, not as a requirement? Because people are very visual.
We could use it as a policy, somewhere on the website, like here's some examples. But
Thank
not,
you. That's
not in the code.
Yeah, I would say that that's a good way to do it because people need to see what we're talking about, and that would be helpful. Like I said, as an appendix or something, here's what we're talking about. So much better when you can say, this is, and they, oh, I get that.
So these are all of the things that we regulate, the roof design and pitch, there's a lot there. Massing, porches, pedestrian connections, architectural details, materials, windows, garages, accessory structures. So this is why the definitions section expanded so much.
Good, let's just bury them in paperwork.
And if I read Carrie's memo right, a lot of those items on that list are things that they could ask for a mandatory adjustment away from, right?
Assuming we're not exempted.
Right.
Unless we're exempted.
Unless we're, okay.
Right.
Okay.
So continuing on with the residential design. So one of the things that the concept plan calls for is diversity of housing. And so we looked at several different cities and how they've included diversity standards in their code. And one of the simplest ways to do it was to require a certain amount of middle housing per acre. So that's what we've looked at is there's a minimum percentage of middle housing, and then based on that acreage, we would say, okay, we're expecting to see this amount of different housing types. So if a developer proposes a subdivision of 2 to 10 acres, we're going to look for 15% of the dwelling units to be a different housing type. And those types are middle housing types. They're duplex, triplex, quadplex, and cottage cluster.
Can you back up to the 0 to 2? The reason I'm going to ask this question is you've got one housing type. So what's to prevent somebody from breaking down their phasing to all being 2 acres?
Yeah, nothing.
So they still get one housing type,
Right.
which could be single family. Could it be could it be duplexes?
Yeah.
I mean, they could propose what they want still, but we're not going to require them to do more than one housing type. So they could do duplexes or triplexes. We're not going to, we actually can't say no to that, but we're just not going to require it at that point.
Well, why are we being so generous?
Do you want to change the breakdown?
Well, you could go 0 to 1 and anything above 1 acre. If you have 1.1 acre, then you bump into the next category where we get some diversity of housing. I just,
We just kind of picked a
I know, I'm
place
thinking
to
of all the ways you could get around.
That's a good thought, because the goal for others is to circumvent what you put up there.
Exactly, and that's what I was trying, my brain was trying to think, okay, how would I get around this? Let's say I buy 10 acres, I could plat 2 acres, 2 acres, 2 acres, 2 acres.
Yeah.
Currently, we don't have a phasing provision except through master plan process. So you'd
But
have
what about the shadow plat for subdivision?
But you still, if you've got more than, if you can be subdivided, right, you can partition off one piece, then you have to relieve
wait
the
to
remainder,
plat.
and then you'd have to do a subdivision on the remainder. You can't. Unless it got pulled, we addressed that serial partitioning essentially years
Yeah,
ago.
I know, and we had that happen.
We got minimum densities.
That's what my brain was going back to before we had that requirement.
Right, when folks would just partition.
He does bring up the minimum density requirement. So if you have 10 acres and you're going to partition off, Yeah. If somebody's creative, they can get around it.
Yeah, but see, what I'm thinking of too is we
Yeah.
don't have a lot of big 10-acre tracts.
Right.
What I'm thinking about is all these little small, the guy's got his half-acre ranchette with his house in the middle, they scrape the house, and then they come in and say, well, I've got, that's what we're looking at. I mean, this chart is great, but what is the reality of the lot sizes we have out there? And this chart, to me, should reflect that better to accommodate what we're really trying to get at, instead of, it's a good start, but I mean, I'm thinking in my head, what is left out there that could be redeveloped or developed? And it's not going to be the 10 to 30 acres.
Well, because this is only applicable in the Park Place concept plan area. So it's really only applicable in these large, vacant, undeveloped tracts. This code doesn't apply to infill.
Right, but I'm still
anywhere.
thinking of all the small parcels. If I look at the Park Place, the map of that area, there are some bigger tracts, but then there's also a lot of little ones too.
Yeah, you have your half acres with the septic on it.
Yes.
Right.
But we can adjust that
1
table
acre.
to 0 to 1.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe take a quick look at what is the propensity of the lot sizes that are in that particular area, and adjust this chart so that it can better reflect what we're trying to get at with that lot size. Instead of thinking about it, that we've got that clear flat land out in Central Point like we used to, and that's what we had. We had, 20, 30 acres, and it was This is going to be way different. This is going to be way different in terms of the reality of what we're looking at in terms of the parcel sizes. And I think, again, you could look at that and then adjust this chart to match that. That's what I would like to see.
Okay.
Agreed.
All right, so we're moving on
Sorry.
to... Yeah.
Just thought of something. Another thing that came up, diversity. In the original plan that was, we all know the process it went through. Another one of the things that was in the Park Place concept plan was that those different housing types had to be distributed throughout the development. And they ended up all in one spot. Was there any attempt to try to write a clear and objective standard around that?
No, not yet.
So,
That was one of the things that was an objection. You're correct,
exactly.
yes.
Yeah, because it was all clustered in one spot, and that does that mean, did that qualify the goal and the concept plan of spreading it throughout the development?
And
good luck writing clear and objective standard for that, but.
Well, especially with middle housing laid over the top, right? I mean, the idea of diversifying the housing types and lot sizes is kind of based on our historic R10, R8, R6, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so now that you've got middle housing, we're happy to probably look at it, but it's like, every fourth lot needs to be a certain different type, but I mean, essentially, you don't know which ones are going to be the duplexes, the triplexes, the single families.
Right.
It may not be doable, but I think we ought to take a look at it, because that was one of the sticking points.
okay. We can see what we can do.
Well, I agree with you, Mike. I think at least it could be looked at. We may not be able to get there, but again, in our heads, we're trying to go back and say, okay, what were the things that we were trying to accomplish? Do we still want to accomplish those, or do we want to look at something different?
I agree with attempting to distribute them throughout. I think it makes for a much more aesthetically pleasing neighborhood.
Well, that's how the neighborhoods in the east are.
Yeah.
It's not all the same thing.
Oh, yeah, the older
Yeah.
neighborhoods in Oregon City.
Yeah.
And that, although I'm not even gonna, I'm just gonna bring it up, and it's for another night. But I'm probably the only person in the room that thinks that lot size averaging is a good idea. Except I wouldn't call it that. I would call it lot size diversity. Because if you look at the interesting neighborhoods in Oregon City, it's a variety of lot sizes, so you get a variety of house sizes that appeal to a variety of people. Or you end up with a subdivision like, unfortunately, the one I live in, which is all bump, and they're all 2,500 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath houses, and they're boring as hell.
Well, I will tell you that those...
But I don't want lot size average to be able to use like it was in that one case, which is when it exploded, when it was abused in order to get more lots.
And that is my fear. Now, I can speak to this in my neighborhood. There was no plan of forethinking about this. Lots got changed around, and I'm thinking of my block particularly, to cram 2 more houses in when there were 60 by 100 lots, 4 to each side of the block. And then they did all these weird lot line adjustments, which some of us are still reaping not the benefit of it, but there's problems with it because of the way they did it. And they just indiscriminately did it. And that may provide variety, but I can tell you, 100 years hence now from 1844, that I wish there had been some plan, because it has not worked as well as we'd like it to work.
Someday we should talk about that.
Yes, we can, yeah.
Not today.
Not tonight, yes.
Okay, on to neighborhood commercial. So, we also made, the Planning Commission spent quite a bit of time on neighborhood commercial, some of the drafted changes there. So one of the changes, and probably the biggest change, is allowing an increase in the amount of residential square footage in a building. And they discussed this based on that the Johnson Economics analysis that Pete just went over. And there was quite a range of thought. There was a range of thought of just get rid of neighborhood commercial altogether. There was a range of thought of let's just basically let the market decide and not have any limit on commercial. To the other side of no, we need to protect the commercial. So the idea of increasing the amount of residential was their compromise. That came from also the fact that you can have 3-story buildings. And so in a way, it didn't quite make sense to say only 50% of that 3-story building could be residential if we keep the ground floor as commercial. And then what do we do with the rest of it? So the thought was, almost in, I guess, thirds, right? Like 25% commercial, 25% residential, another 25% on that. So that was one of the changes that that the Planning Commission had recommended, and that's in the draft code right now. We have added some landscaping standards to neighborhood commercial, and then we've created this new section that Pete was alluding to earlier with additional permitted uses. So we've included some civic uses, and then the off-site stormwater facilities in the parkland are allowed, but they have some limits on them. And so the stormwater facilities are limited to half an acre. And if a developer needs more than that, they can go through a variance. They can go through a discretionary process. But what's allowed outright is half an acre. And that is to protect the neighborhood commercial area, because it's actually at the low point of the whole, from Holcomb to Livesey. Neighborhood commercial is at, if you think about the way the slopes go, neighborhood commercial's at the bottom of the slope.
You're saying it all runs downhill, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So the stormwater, it would be really easy to just collect it all right there at the low point. So that was the purpose of trying to limit that and saying, okay, you can't do it all here. And so we've just defined what off-site means, and it means that if you're collecting stormwater from a residential area and you're putting your facility in a non-residential area, then it's off-site. That's how we're defining that. And
so tell me what the unintended consequences are of allowing 75% of a building that's neighborhood commercial to be built.
Allowing 75%.
Right, so if we allow 75% and only 25% is going to be commercial, to me, I'm trying to understand what the unintended consequences of that are. Are we gonna just get one little corner that's gonna be some neighborhood commercial, and then we're told, oh, it's too small, we can't rent it, we have to do this?
Is commercial required on the first floor or no?
Is it? Well, residential's not allowed on the ground floor.
So it could be retail, it could be office on the first floor.
Okay.
Right.
So I think that's the measure to kind of protect.
That's the measure to protect. Ground floor residential is allowed if it is set back from the street, I think, 100 feet?
150.
150 feet. So that way you can get, that like horizontal mixed use. There's vertical and horizontal, so you could still have your commercial in front and then the residential behind it. But yeah, I mean, there is a concern that the commercial piece will sit empty.
That's my, I mean, I wrote in the margin on that, on the memo, this is never gonna happen. They're gonna take the money and run and not.
But if you allow, I mean, I think the theory is that if you allow the residential, but you require saving the space on the first floor, maybe monetarily it works out quicker than if you don't.
Correct.
Right, you're gonna be able to subsidize the building with the residential units until you can find a leasee or you get enough rooftops to justify the investment in a business
So this
that's
will.
gonna survive.
And I think it's the rooftop piece.
Right, so this is to
that we were
avoid what we
looking at.
have at the Cove. Could this avoid that? Would it avoid that?
Yeah, I don't know how
Well,
to
the Cove
answer that.
experience was, we're going for vertical tax credit, right, by putting.
Live works, the live work thing, right?
Well, but I don't think those shops ever came to fruition.
No, they never did, and did they get the tax credit? Because if they didn't do it, they shouldn't get it. They should have to give it back.
So, whether it's 50% or 75%, there cannot be residential on the ground
First floor. Okay, correct. See, that didn't say
Unless
that.
it's set back 150 feet.
Pretty far on the parcel, yeah.
So again, that's an out.
The report was correct about people's shopping habits. I mean, for what you're talking about, service type things, whether it be barber shop or beauty parlor or dentist office, I can see those, but you look at people shopping out. I mean, I was just at IKEA, or I was just at, people want to go to that one-stop, big providers, and they're, price-wise, the little guy can't keep. I think the report was accurate in its economic analysis.
Well,
But the question is, does it ever come to fruition, or does it sit there vacant?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm looking at, other areas of the metro area where there's lots of little strip commercial that, you need to run in and get X, you can go there, because there's lots of little things there. I could see somebody taking a small little space to have, like you say, a hair salon, and you have some economies of scale because, gee, you don't have to go all the way across town because you found this new person to do your hair or whatever.
But again, the demand for those won't be driven until the residential is established.
Right.
Put in a little UPS store or something, or a mailbox place, I don't know.
So is there, on the additional permitted uses, you mentioned there's a size cap on the off-site stormwater.
On-site or off-site?
Just off-site.
Okay, because on-site's like 140 square feet is about what they're limited to according to this thing.
So, question is,
140 by 140.
is there a cap on how much, if you add all three of those together, how much of the NC zone could be taken up with those non-NC uses?
I don't think we ran a cumulative calculation to. So
is there a limit on how much parkland can be in NC?
Yeah, it's 3/4 of an acre.
Okay, and is there a limit on civic uses?
No, because that's something that the concept plan envisioned would happen there.
It could be public or private. They could potentially be a daycare or children's theater or something like that, that would provides a civic amenity.
And I had a little problem with the list of possible uses. Some of them were, public kind of uses. Some of them were like, lodge or what was a couple that I'd be concerned with? Fitness club.
Yeah.
A membership kind of thing really isn't a civic use.
Okay.
So you're thinking that it should be limited to public uses?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
If it's gonna be called civic.
Pardon?
If it's gonna be called civic.
Yes.
And maybe that's the problem.
Maybe a gym is okay, it's just not a civic use.
Gym would be great,
Right.
but it's not, yeah.
Unless it's one we run through our Parks and Rec.
Then it's civic.
Well, do we want to say civic and other things in addition to that?
I mean, the things that can go into neighborhood commercial are all the uses from the mixed-use corridor, which is a long list of different types of commercial and retail. But the civic was something that was specific to Park Place concept plan, and so we kind of pulled it into this section to say, here's some other things that we want to see in the area and that are allowed. And then the stormwater and parkland, we pulled it into that section to put the size restrictions on. So there are all kinds of things, different commercial retail uses that could go into neighborhood commercial. But the civic list, we can tailor that so that it's just focused on public
Well, I guess if
uses.
there's not a space cap on it, I guess it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
there's
still
not
a non-residential use.
Right.
It's still a.
Right. And the idea would be
commercial
like,
type of
how do we attract people to the area? How do we create that kind of interactivity on the street? So that's where that civic piece would come from.
Let me just take a quick second.
Never mind.
Call on.
That makes sense, thinking
Commissioner
about
Smith.
it, because it's still a non-residential use.
Right.
So, Rocky, has your head just exploded yet, or or you're just mesmerized by the whole thing?
I'm okay, it's a lot.
That's what I said. So I had to make sure you hadn't completely just gone off the rails here.
Commissioner, we are so close.
I know we
so
are.
close.
I just wanted to check in with you. I didn't want to think we were ignoring him, and
We got the thumbs up. All right. Thanks,
Good.
Rocky. Okay. And then just, I guess, the last piece. So the residential uses in NC do have additional standards around them of design standards. And, okay, so we added site design standards to really try to create that kind of urban character along the main street. So where the structures can be sited, the parking has to be either on the side or in the back. We've defined what the building facades need to look like. We want to see some pedestrian elements, and we have some design standards around what corner buildings and their entrances look like.
there's quite a few corner entrance buildings in the little development in Lake Oswego there off of State Street. You go into, you have the ones on the perimeter, and then you have some on the inside where the parking structure is, and they're all kind of corner entrances, which is kind of a nice, it breaks up that space nicely instead of just one building after the other with doors.
Okay, this is another section where we spend a lot of time on, and I think we alluded to earlier, we're still kind of tightening up. And so in the site plan and design review standards, we're adding some code around park dedication and trail dedication. So it's an entirely new section. We had originally thought about requiring open space, but it's voluntary, and there's a lot of the concept plan envisioned the natural resource areas as open space, and we have a lot of code already in the natural resource overlay district about how to dedicate and maintain that open space. So we didn't spend a lot of time on that, but we are looking at how to get at this 8-acre park in in the North Village, and then how to get the dedication of the land needed for a 4-acre park in the South Village. And then there's several trails that are identified in our 2004 Trails Master Plan that were also adopted in the TSP. And so those trails will be the ones that we are looking for land dedication on, because they've already been described and studied, and there's costs, albeit they're 2004, but there's some study behind the trails. They mostly follow the perimeter of the concept plan, and specifically that North Village. So it would connect up the area with the park. Okay, and then in the master plan section, we added a piece of language, and I think it's somewhat important to point out that we added this language to be very clear that we have created a clear and objective path. And if a developer cannot or does not want to meet that clear and objective path, here is their other path that they can take. And so the purpose of that was just to kind of reiterate how development can occur. Okay, you made it. So this is where we're at today. We presented to CIC last week, so Adam, thanks for sitting through it twice.
You have it memorized?
Was it more exciting this time?
Well, repetition.
Well, nothing will compare to the amount of questions that the mayor is going to ask, so.
And then Pete will present to the Park Place Neighborhood Association next week. And our goal is to begin legislative adoption hearings the second meeting in September. So that would start at Planning Commission in September, and then you would see it back here in October. Probably not the first meeting. I think that timing was too close to make it actually work. So it's probably the second meeting in October. Okay. That's it.
Well,
do you have any more questions?
sort of. I don't have any more questions right now. I guess I need to figure out how to have further discussion about the legal memo. It was good. It's very well written.
There's just a lot in there.
There's a lot in there. I got a lot of questions.
Yeah. And I'm not certain we're going to have answers.
Well, I know. And I'm not sure I could articulate them all in writing.
Yeah.
Perhaps we can have a follow-up on just that particular stick, because that's where the rubber's meeting the road.
Yes.
As unclear as it is.
Well, I agree with that. I don't want to be always in a reactive position. The things that we talked about initially, and I know I brought up the moratorium, and I brought up maybe passing a meeting with the expansion of the clear and objective standards. What can we create that places us in a defensible position, especially in the realm of public safety and transportation? And I still like the idea of possibly writing some piece that says you need to be able to evacuate X number of personnel in X amount of time, and the road infrastructure. That's a measurable, clear, objective standard that could be determined by a traffic engineer.
Well, it's a matter of could be a matter of life and death, and I don't know how clear and more objective you get than that.
Yeah,
I'm talking off the top of my head, but I think you're correct. I think it's something that we should have a further discussion on. I know that we bit the bullet when we put the moratorium, it was within our city limits, but we had put a moratorium on the developments along Holmes Lane in that area because of infrastructure issues. And we know that there were people who were not happy about that because they said, well, I want to develop now. Well, we couldn't do what we needed to do. What I worry about, and I don't know if you'll all agree with me, but we've got two things there. We need to update the urban growth management agreement with the county, and we also need to get them to understand there are things that they need to put in their TSP, and I don't know if that's going to be like pulling hen's teeth or what, but I just, it's troublesome that we have a partnership, but then in other areas we don't. And I don't know if this is something that needs to get brought up to C4 about their TSP, because I think us participating in the TSP is important. The same point you brought up with us receiving timely notification. I mean, we've got the urban growth management agreement such that that says that they are supposed to do that, and why they have not is beyond me. But there seems to be a lack of recognition on one hand that what they do doesn't affect us, and then there's, on the other hand, things that they do affect us. And everything they do affects us. But there's not a clear recognition that that's all-encompassing. They seem to pick and choose about what they think is affecting us.
Does that agreement have an expiration on it, or is it just?
No, it's so out of date. We were trying to update it when I worked at the city, and we never got there. The county just didn't want to do it.
Well, right, I think it's a matter of political will. Respectfully, if you want to update the urban growth boundary agreement, I think it will have to start with your discussions with your counterparts, and then staff can work through the technical piece, but there has to be this willingness that it's going to happen, right?
Yeah. Well, we've never had a joint work session with them. Have we had one with them ever, the county? I was kind of scared.
Did you get a phone call now and then?
I'm kind of scared to even bring it up, but.
I don't think so.
Yeah, that would really surprise me. I don't recall
My list is getting longer.
Well, sometimes as a government body, you have to take an action that triggers a reaction. And if we took the action of saying, we're going to do a moratorium because of transportation and infrastructure constraints, and we're willing to try to overcome them during the course of that moratorium, then others are going to be forced to have to work with us.
If we put together a draft of an urban growth management agreement that was advantageous for us and said, here you go.
I'd start the discussion.
It might, yeah, I think it would. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My head hasn't totally exploded, but it's right at the edge.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks, Bill.
can we follow up with you?
Yes.
As a commission on this?
You might be following up with Carrie on this?
Well, I'm hoping that we can follow up as a group on this, because things that I'm thinking about, others have thought about it, or there may be other things you've thought about. Like I said, I read it twice, and I was just like...
Yeah, it's dense, and it's not, there's not necessarily a clear path.
I understand. There's not a clear path, and there's not a clear answer. I'm not expecting you or Carrie to give us 1, 2, 3, but it's something that we need to better understand.
Yes.
Because there are ramifications no matter which way we turn, depending on the case law. And some of the case law, as I saw it, is conflicting.
Some of there is no case law.
And some of there is no. I mean, when I read in here that she said that they looked up the word clear and objective in the dictionary, and I go, okay, well, which version did they use? Webster's on a bridge? What version of the dictionary did they use? I mean, did they go and do AI? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's actually the 2003 Merriam-Webster. I can get you the site if you want.
So yeah, but I mean, that was one. I sat there and I went, well, I went and got my dictionary and looked at it.
Yeah.
So it's.
Is it something for another agenda?
Yes, it's something for another agenda, because.
So why don't we look at that when we do our agenda planning, and
this is
when we can bring it back.
This is not just today. This is binding future commissions down the road.
Yeah.
And those of us that are here now need to get a better handle on this, so that we can pass this on to next batch of people who are going to have to deal with this, because this is not going away.
Nope. We're ready whenever you can fit it on the agenda. Okay. We can make sure we'll be there.
Yeah, probably sooner than later.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
So where do we want to go, gentlemen, with the next agenda item, which is number 4? I know that Mr. Marl has something timely.
The consent agenda contract?
No, we have committee.
We didn't do this one.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Let's get to 2C, consent agenda contract amount. This was something that you were concerned about, Mr. Mitchell, and...
Yeah, and I'm kind of thinking about it a little differently, I guess. I had a conversation with Mr. Lewis, and he made a lot of good points about the detail that's put into the staff report, and it really does explain it, I guess. So could we, in those staff reports, make it more clear the budget impact? Is this something that was in the budget? Is it roughly equal to what we thought it was going to cost? Is it,
or is it more?
Is it more? Is it less? Are we getting money from other people more than we thought, or less? Just more. If I could just have more of an understanding of the budget. I know there's a budget impact line, but it's just a dollar amount, and I don't know how to compare that to, we're spending $2 million on this when we thought it was only going to cost us $1 million. That would be of more concern than, yep, it's $2 million, but we budgeted, we thought it was going to be $2 million, so we're okay. You know what I mean?
Just a quick thing. Thank you, Pete and Aquila. I know that you guys are going through a lot to deal with this, and I'm sure your heads have already exploded as well in the back there at CDD, but thank you.
That makes sense?
I think that's an easy, because, what we think things are costing, as you can understand,
yeah,
it's nowhere in the ballpark.
Yeah, or was it even something that we budgeted for, or is this something that has come up that we have to do even though we didn't anticipate it in the budget?
I guess
something of immediate impact.
We can try to, include a little bit more clarity on contract amount proposal versus assumptions made during the budgeting process.
That would be it.
Yeah.
Just a little more clarity of.
Yeah, rather than just source of funds.
Yeah, and then let's see how that goes, and then we can revisit that.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. That covers
Does that
my.
make sense to you, Rocky? He said yes, thumbs up.
Yeah, I just think, because I understand the reason why it was brought up, and I think having a stronger budget narrative would be helpful, but in the end, if we change the amount for what qualifies for consent, all we're doing is placing what's already posted publicly on a different part of the agenda, and all we're doing is going to say, give us a presentation, and the city manager is going to say, look at the staff report. I mean, it doesn't seem as though it's really going to give the public much more clarity than keeping it on the consent agenda where it is already publicly available.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's why I rethought my suggestion was for that reason.
Yeah, I think we as public entities continue to have sticker shock over what things are costing. Asphalt, concrete, timber, labor, and John, I think, has done a good job of, he's able to suss out when people are, what's the word I want to say, giving some excessive quote because, are they bidding because they really don't want the job, so they're going to come up with some ridiculous, if they come up with some ridiculous, don't bid, it's like, don't waste our time. But it still happens all the time.
Yeah, and I think you'll see, we certainly, when we put these budgets together, especially once we're starting to get into the second year, there was some big adjustments that do happen and assumptions that are made. It's really a prioritization of, funding availability. Maybe it has a match with another agency. Maybe it has timing of infrastructure work being done, so it makes sense to shift a little bit. So we'll just realize there is some fluidity in some of these decisions that we have to make about, okay, we've got a project that can go on Warner Milne right now. Maybe it's going to take a little bit more because we know we're ripping up the street because Northwest Natural's in there. There's some things that are unknown, but yeah, we can certainly try to do a little bit better job
But
of
that will make us a
explaining
little more nimble when we know those sort of things, rather than, because you know how many complaints we get, well, you just ripped up the street, and now so-and-so's ripping up the street.
Yeah.
We've done way better than we did 15 years ago on making those coordinations, because we've insisted on the communication with our other providers out here. So when they're going to do something, we go, well, wait a minute, is this a priority? We're going to have a project coming up. Can we somehow coordinate that? And that makes a whole lot of sense. They're doing a better job of communicating with us and letting us know what they're doing.
Right, and nothing restricts us from pulling things from the consent agenda as well. If one of us or if a concerned citizen relays a concern to us, that's always an option we will continue to have.
Yep, I think that's a good step forward.
Thank you, Mike. What's your pleasure, gentlemen, on item, so we have any communications?
I was just gonna say, so I didn't get, just to give you a heads up, next Wednesday, we don't have urban renewal. We're gonna start at 6. We're gonna bring back the adaptive reuse grant. I didn't get my upcoming work session items to y'all in time since I was gone last week. So, and then on the September work session, we're looking at, bringing back, we have the, Clackamas County Fire Chief coming in to talk about, what other jurisdictions are doing around fireworks, in the region. Destination marketing organization update, and then the 4th of July event planning discussion around for September.
You could also tell us how wisely they're using our money. Tax base increase, the chief, fire chief.
You asked about fireworks.
I know.
Okay. You can ask him whatever you'd like.
He may know the answer
While
to
you're
that.
here.
Yeah, by the way.
Roll your budget out for us.
No, I don't want to see the budget. It just, how's it going? They put up that banner, on the corner there. We have more staffing. And I saw one of the battalion chief and I said, do you guys have a permit for that banner? It's in the public right away. Okay, item number 4. We had talked very briefly about doing a mid-year check-in on our goals and all of that. Were we going to be having a little session that's not a work session, but more in an informal session like we did with the retreat?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, do we want to whip through the committee reports? It's been a long week for me. I am.
I got nothing.
What do you mean you have nothing?
I'm committee report.
He's waving.
Yes.
I know you had something, because you said last week, I'm going to wait till next week. Last week I asked you what was going on with C4. You said, I'm holding that for next week.
Well, yeah, because
It still is.
He's holding it for the next week after that. He's holding it.
Well, because it wasn't committee reports, and so I didn't prepare for that.
I know. I'm always happy to hear whatever you're doing. Me personally.
It's not as though I had anything specific to share, but at C4 we did go over the joint transportation values document, which we had already approved, but there was a desire to make edits, and so we're going to bring it back, I believe.
Yes, it's on the 21st.
To reapprove the updated version.
What happened to my question to Paul about the sunrise corridor?
I am not sure.
It still says Sunrise Corridor, but it also says widening of I-205.
Yes. It clarifies because the original reason they put it in there was that it was a part of HB 2017, the original transportation package. But they added more to clarify that there are other things in the transportation package that need to be honored as well.
That's all I wanted.
Yeah.
I didn't want that singled out as like, ooh, this is our star project.
It specifically calls out widening 205.
I'll just do the rest of mine, just really quickly.
Please.
CIC, they're moving forward with changing some of their bylaws to make it so that you can either live or own a business in a neighborhood in order to be a CIC representative. Because the problem is that with the Two Rivers neighborhood, there are dwellings there, but most of the people who are involved are business owners in that neighborhood, and currently they are not allowed to be selected as CIC representatives, and so they're trying to change that so that they can have a seat at the table. And then lastly...
Is there anything in there about not everybody who's on there can be related to each other?
And then just quickly for youth advisory, the mayor conducted interviews, and I was happy to join her on that, and we interviewed quite a few impressive students, and I believe that the final appointments are going to be coming out here soon.
On the 21st, I believe.
I'll also add that last month I was asked by the school board to present just an update on our activities, and so I, along with Hannah Schmidt, our community engagement specialist, and one of our students attended one of their board meetings, and we were able to present just the activities that we have gone through. And so obviously understanding that our partnership with the school district is critical when it comes to facilities, when it comes to staff and communications. And so looking forward to continue building that relationship with them, and that is what I have.
We still haven't rescheduled that meeting that got canceled.
Yes, and part of that was because they just recently elected a new chair and vice chair.
Yes,
And so we'll have the opportunity to meet with the new chair and vice chair.
They didn't tell us that though at the beginning, so. So Rocky, there are things happening at, I'm gonna, because I skipped to Commissioner Marl, so there's a new director.
Yes. So I have put off my reports for a little bit. Hopefully my connection's okay. Let me know if not.
It's good.
But I'll try to get through some of this. So updates with Clackamas Heritage Partners, Historic Oregon City, and the End of the Oregon Trail. First of all, I'd like to say that we've been talking about, the kind of transition from Gail Yazzolino to a new executive director. Gail has done an amazing job at the End of the Oregon Trail for many, many years. And I just appreciate for all her work and all the things that she's done while she's there. While she has been there, she's still in meetings with the board and still kind of, keeping an eye on things and in this transition with our new executive director at the End of the Oregon Trail. So I wanted to briefly introduce, she's not at the meeting tonight, but I wanted to give you a little bit of information about the new executive director, and then really quick and some of the focal points that we are talking about for the future at End of the Oregon Trail. Of course, there's a lot of questions and a lot of things that we've been talking about in regards to the facilities plan and how that future use of that building might affect the End of the Oregon Trail organization and Clackamas Heritage Partners. So some of you may have already met her, but her name is Corrine Lowenthal, and Corrine is the new executive director at the End of the Oregon Trail. She has been involved in a lot of different types of things, but was involved in stage production, stage managing, working with musicians, production management, and directing and managing, managing shows, managing director, all over. She did that for about 15 or 20 years. She spearheaded the rise of the Post 5 Theater, which is, and also actually orchestrated a huge capital campaign for them. She has been involved in TV. She started a private consulting company in 2018 that focused on contract negotiation and also nonprofit development. She launched an affordable housing for artists program, and she continued that until the pandemic, but is now continuing that with her move to Oregon City. That project now is called the Emerald Homestead. I think she was involved in one of the grants that came forward to us earlier in the year. So she's getting involved quite a lot in the community of Oregon City. And we had one meeting, first meeting that we met her, the amount of ideas that she had and the amount of things that she was wanting to launch into for the End of the Oregon Trail, and not really knowing some of the details that we've been bringing up about the future of that building and deferred maintenance and all of this stuff. And so she's kind of juggling a lot and has met with some of our partners and city staff already. So I just wanted to kind of give you her name out there because you'll be meeting her more. I think we'll probably love to have her maybe come make a presentation to the City Commission. But let me give you kind of a really quick preview of kind of what the board at the End of the Oregon Trail is kind of focusing on in this next year with her. One of the main things is we are looking at basically strategic planning meeting very soon for the board to talk about, a lot of things about the future of the organization, some of which might, connect to the building itself and the future of that, which of course is something that we as a city will be talking about separately. We have looked at our scheduling of meetings for the next year. I'll be honest in saying that this board in the past has not met as regularly as we would like, and because of a lot of the people on the board being retired and different schedules. So we're trying to make it an effort to create a better schedule of meetings, that meeting every month, maybe, and also rotating between Zoom and in-person. Continue to meet every month without worrying about everyone's various schedules. So we have a draft kind of along that schedule for the next year. We're trying to get the board more active in the organization itself, in not only active in meetings, but active in attending events at the site, experiencing things at the site, and kind of a goal for board members to help in fundraising, and kicking off a capital campaign in the future for the organization, but also to hopefully deal with some of the deferred maintenance of the building. There is, Corinne has been meeting individually with each board member to kind of get a feel for each of us and our insights in the community, and that's continuing. Like I said, we're working to do a strategic planning meeting. She is working on a draft budget for 2025 that we should be seeing in the next couple months. There's basically an audit happening with staffing and employment and revising, our handbook for employees and all this stuff. So there's tons of different things that she's tackling to update some things that haven't been updated in a long time. They're looking at everything from upping and re-looking at the inventory for the gift shop, attendance, and especially in the next short-term cycle of deferred maintenance, what are we thinking about the building, and can we help in some way with the deferred maintenance? Is there a way to, save the building rather than demolish it and all of that? So those are things that you'll be kind of hearing them talk about. I think that's probably it for now. There's some partnerships that are going to come to the forefront that Clackamas Heritage Partners is working with, and Historic Oregon City. So I use both those names because some people don't know that Historic Oregon City, the name is actually Clackamas Heritage Partners. It's the same organization, but that confuses people, I think, sometimes. Anyway, one of the partnerships that we've been really trying to connect with even more, and most of you know about this, is the Curtis Foundation, Curtis Trailers Foundation. And so there's been a lot of dialogue between the End of the Oregon Trail and the Curtis Foundation on collections and being able to show some of the wagons from the Curtis collection. I think there's some more conversations that will happen between those two organizations to see if they can share in moving forward in other ways in the future. So I think that's it for now, but I think maybe we should try it in the future, in the next few months, maybe of the fall, have Corinne kind of give us an update where she's at with the End of the Oregon Trail and kind of moving forward. So it's been a kind of a drought of updates, but things are moving fast now at the End of the Oregon Trail, and with some leadership and getting active. So leave it at that for now.
My understanding was that there's been a recruitment for new board members, so where is that? Yes,
that's part of it as well, absolutely, yes.
So how many?
So actually, if there's people, and we're trying to get the word out about that, if there are people that have, an interest in that, they can contact me or anyone, probably at the End of the Oregon Trail or Corinne herself, to get information about what we're looking for new board membership.
So who's left on the board? I don't even know. Besides
Dan Fowler, myself, Carolyn Morrissey, we're putting me on spotlight on my list here with me. Let's see, we have Wade Byers is still on the board. We had a couple deaths on the, we've had lost some of board members recently. And I'm missing a couple, the Curtis Foundation, I can't remember his name.
Don Scott?
Anyway. I don't have the list with me, so I'm just remembering off the top of my head.
Rocky, is it Don Scott?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
And then who else?
John George.
Is John George still on it?
Yes, thank you. John George from the Federated Tribes Grand Ron. I'm missing a couple still too.
That's okay, that's more than we knew.
Yep.
Okay, Commissioner Mitchell.
I actually kind of did it at our last meeting.
Oh, right, okay.
Talked about UGB.
Okay, let me run through mine really quickly. Clackamas Environmental Services is, we were supposed to have a big event with a tunnel boring machine arriving. It's stuck in Wyoming someplace, and it's not here, so that's delayed. Downtown Association, we're having a strategic planning meeting this Friday. Impact, let me go to the easy ones. South Fork Water Board, we are on a break, and we'll have a board and staff luncheon coming up in another week, I believe, next Thursday, something like that. I did follow up with our staff. They're asking about how things were going with the forensic audit, and had they been in communications with our staff, since we have the most to lose and gain by this. So they're still working through that. We'll get a report at our next meeting, and I believe our next meeting will be in September. So I'm a little dismayed that we don't meet, but I understand this is their busiest time, but I'll have to ask the director for an update, because we have not received one. We should have gotten one in July, but we didn't, and we need one this month. Willamette Falls and Landings Heritage Area, just got an email regarding, there'll be some presentations coming up to our commission and others regarding the legislation for the National Heritage Area, and I'm happy to say that we've gotten agreement from the tribes through the efforts of John George. So when I say agreement, doesn't mean they went like, yay, we're all excited, but at least they didn't say no. They are in neutral, but they are supporting it. It's tribal neutral, and like I said, that will be coming up. Willamette Falls Legacy Project liaisons, obviously we have not been meeting. We did, Tony and I and Alex had a meeting with Kate Brown, the new director. We asked that question about why we haven't been meeting, why are we not part of this board. It's, as you're aware, very tribal focused right now. The tribal chairman of the Yakima tribe is the chair, and they are in the process of hiring and should by now have a new tribal liaison, which I hope will be a step forward. And we did talk about the legislation. She's looking at the legislation for the National Heritage Area as an entree for some low-hanging fruit to be open more discussions. The Locks Authority, we did not meet this month primarily because we're still working on the agreement with the Corps. Their work is continuing, and it looks like it's on time and maybe not totally on the budget, but it's the construction is still working. And then obviously you heard about the layoff at the Westland paper. That is going to have an impact on some of the locks work. Just very sad. Youth Advisory, Adam already reported on that, and there'll be a report in next week's staff report regarding the students that we interviewed, and all of them were just pretty much top-notch. Unfortunately, we had quite a few applications, but not everybody responded to our request for an interview or even contacted us after they submitted their application. So that was not good. And I'm saving the best for last. So we had an impact meeting on the 24th of July, and the primary topics of discussion are involving the big UGB expansion that Sherwood wants to do. And of course, you can well imagine there's pros and cons on each side. It's huge. I mean, it's really, really big. They just had one recently, and there's a lot of discussion. I don't think there's unanimity about whether that's appropriate or not, but we'll see how it falls out. We talked about the functional plan amendments, the thing that Mike is working on with regard to the recommendation that's going to come. A recommendation will come from impact on that. And it's interesting when Mike was talking about the scenarios for the high, medium, and low growth. Washington County, of course, weighed in. They want high growth. I sort of support the middle version because I think it's measured and it's kind of like pouring water out of a cup. You're doing a little here, a little here. You're not just going whammo, jammo. So, interestingly enough, I haven't heard from any of the other jurisdictions, but that's kind of where I'm coming from. The other thing I wanted to bring up quickly is that the Metropolitan Mayors Consortium met also the following day. We're still having discussions about supportive housing. Joe Buck and Lacey Beatty, who is the chair of the MCC, met with the 3 county commission chairs, which is interesting, and talked to them about the fact that they're building all this housing, but where are the supportive services that go with it, and that all of this is getting laid onto the cities, and we're not in the supportive housing business. Lacey talked about the fact that how well their community court was going in Beaverton, and I know that you are aware of what's going on. You're aware of what's going on with their community court? So anyway, she said that if you wanted to reach out to their chief, you could talk to, I don't know if it's him or her, but also maybe Judge Lindgren talking to their community court, but it seems to be very successful. They're very happy. We spent a lot of time talking about the Grants Pass case and how that is going to affect all of our communities. A question came up about car camping, and I didn't really have an answer. Some jurisdictions allowed, others don't. We basically said that we don't know yet. The other thing that's still out there is that we're going to resubmit the OMA, the Oregon Mayors Association Housing Task Force information, where we asked for direct funding, even though the governor poo-pooed it, which was not, of course, we were not happy about that. And I believe you got maybe a survey from them about what legislative priorities I sit my 3 in, which was infrastructure, and supportive housing funding for the jurisdictions as opposed to the county. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that if we can get a hold of it, we should review the PowerPoint that was submitted at the OMA conference this summer. There was a whole PowerPoint by Patty Mulvihill, our director, on the legal issues, not just Grants Pass, but everything else that's affecting us in some of the federal court cases. It was kind of scary. I went out of there and I thought, yikes. Really concerning about what some of the federal legislations come out, the 9th cert, the 6th cert, that are going to really impact us and our ability to do our jobs as city people. So if we can get a hold of that PowerPoint, it was really good. We spent a lot of time on it. And other than that, just carrying on. Anything else, staff? Okay. We are officially adjourned.